So, like Napoleon, we have to finish the revolution today. There are only two, three type of possible questions which may be asked about the overall theme, about the overall idea of what was the hasil of the entire 25 years of revolution. Mila kya ant mein jaake? Was it even a revolution in the first place? Because see what happened at the end is from 1815 to 1870-71, जो अगले 60-65 साल है, what you get is not a democracy, not a republic, except for 4 years in between, लगभग 4 साढ़े 4 साल छोड़ के, for those 60-65 years, what you have is again a monarchy. Sometimes Bonaparte dynasty, sometimes Bourbon dynasty. So monarchy is replaced with monarchy. The emigres, the aristocrats who had ran away because of the violence of the revolution, gradually come back one by one. Lots of them come back and they get reintegrated into the society. The church, again, gradually church is accepted as the mainstream part of French society. Roman Catholicism gets its main stature back. So monarchy, nobility and church, all of these three things have come back. तो क्या किया कर इतना किया क्या? And these three things don't not only come back, they continue to exist for next 2 to 3 generations. 1860s, 1870s, तब जाके change होता है धीरे धीरे. The entire point is, was it even revolution? So यहाँ पे you have to understand that the change might not come about very quickly, but change is there. The monarchy that has come back is not the same monarchy anymore. It's not the monarchy based on divine rights and royal absolutism. It is the monarchy based on citizens' constitution. Even the monarch is there, that monarch is constitutional monarch. The church that has come back is no more as powerful as it used to be. The state has started to assert its authority. Lots of land is gone. Many people have started to gradually turn into atheism. The dominant role of the church into society and polity, which used to exist earlier, has somehow, to somewhat extent, has subsided. And the aristocracy, the emigres, they come back, but lots of their land is gone to the peasants forever. Their importance in society is reduced because now you have new people coming into the position of power, of administration, of military, everywhere. So there is definitely a change, but that change is more than a reform, a revolution, a kind of reform. Although we have to understand one thing: revolution का मतलब exactly यहाँ पे है क्या पे? Is it just a reform or is it a fundamental change in society? So at the level of ideas, यहाँ पे दो debate होते हैं. एक, some historians say that at the level of ideas, definitely you see the revolution. Over next decades, gradually, the new ideas of political culture, of popular sovereignty, of citizenship, of rule of law, which were only theoretical earlier, now they become permeated in society and gradually they assert themselves. तो उसको आप डिनाई नहीं कर सकते. French Revolution posited some fundamental questions about the nature of relationship between man and the state. It gave some answers, some violent, some peaceful. Some of them lasted, some of them did not last. But nonetheless, these questions are still very much important to us. These questions did not exist earlier. The kind of questions in the politics that were discussed before French Revolution were completely gone. The structure is changed because the people have joined politics. The popular politics have come into the fore for the first time. So there are lots of fundamental changes. The feudalism, which was there in almost entire Europe, was gradually dissolved one by one because of the intervention of French Revolution. So fundamental change तो है, भले थोड़ा slow क्यों ना हो, थोड़ा uneven क्यों ना हो, but है. Other people say कि more than such ideas, the final hasil, the final outcome of those 25 years of French Revolution was actually state becoming very prominent, dominant, and strong. And it is in the same progress. In the 17th century, The state was becoming absolutist anyway. The French Revolution gave so much power to state now. Conscription hai, administration hai, centralization, bureaucratization, all these things become so important that state started to have much more presence in our life than before. The state became more efficient and more capable of organizing society. It was not before. So this is not a very necessarily a positive legacy, but it is a legacy. Now, if I ask you a question, a basic question, how do we compare the American Revolution and the French Revolution in a sense of that which one is more radical? Undoubtedly, French Revolution is much more radical than American. American तो दोनों में, in both of them you see the middle class role being prominent, bourgeois role तो है ही, but in case of American, bourgeois role is much more prominent. In the French Revolution, you see the episodes in between when the common people have come and they have arrogated the power to themselves. The reform agenda has become so revolutionary that it goes against middle class also. The common people also sometimes have their own leadership. They drive the leaders to some extent. So ये हो गई philosophical बात. But if I have to go with concrete things, the exact achievements, the objectives, the changes that were brought, and then I have to compare American with French, and I have to prove that the French Revolution is more radical than American because we have studied both of them now. What are those points? The पहला point है वो है property rights, inequality of wealth. In case of American Revolution, it started without the existence of aristocracy, right? वहां तो new world था. There is no old entrenched aristocracy and estates system. तो वहां पे the question of redistribution of wealth was never so prominent. एक दो बार ऐसे किस्से हुए जब जनता उठ रही थी, जैसे कि बोस्टन मैसेकर दबा दिया गया, मिडिल क्लास ने सब चीजें अपने हाथ में ही रखी अंत तक. So the question of redistribution of property was not even touched. But in case of French Revolution, it was there. Voting became universal male voting for that brief period of Jacobin. And then you see that you have lots of property redistribution in case of aristocrats' land, the churches' land, etc., things coming up. And the questions were constantly put about the private property. So although the question of the wealth distribution was not solved, neither in America nor in French, but in French, उसके साथ वो जूझे थे. In American वो भी नहीं हुआ था. So from that angle, American से अधिक radical is French Revolution. But there is second angle also, because of which the French Revolution is more radical than American, is about the universality of the rights, at least in theory. At least in theory, even शब्दों में क्यों ना हो, look at the Dr. Mac, or look at what Napoleon did. Lots of rights, if not all, were relatively considered much more universal. Implementation के समय सारे नहीं हुए, अलग बात है. But at least at the level of theory, at the level of idea, the rights were applicable to all the people, all the men at least. And that was far away from the slave-owning founding fathers of America. That was far cry from slave-owning founding fathers of America. So at the both levels of inequality of wealth का question के बारे में बात करना हो, universal applicability of human rights हो, ये दोनों की जो extent and intensity जो है, that is much more in case of French. And the reason being popular participation. तो ये दोनों के पीछे का जो reason है, primary reason is popular participation in the revolution was much more than in the case of American Revolution. So at least at that level, why I am comparing French and American Revolution here is not just because it's another possible question, but also because we are considering the radicalness, the revolutionary intensity of French Revolution. मैंने सवाल ये पूछा था कि सच में revolution है या नहीं है? Because at the end, in 1815, you come back to monarchy, aristocracy, and church. Then I said, nahi, revolution hai because ideas became important. Then I said, state became powerful, so we have a strong legacy. And it is also a revolution because when you compare to American Revolution, you see there is a more intensity of the change of the ideas. Okay. So from that angle, we can definitely say it was a strong revolution. Although जनरली आप जितनी अपेक्षा लेके चलते हो सारी हासिल तो नहीं होती. You make a schedule of weekly study, कितना हासिल होता है? So in the case of such tumultuous cataclysmic events like revolution, they have some expectations to start with. कितना हासिल होता है? So we have to say, so when we say legacy, what could French Revolution achieve? वो क्या कर पाए? तो वो क्या कर पाए can be defined based on वो क्या करना चाहते थे. What they wanted to do in the first place will determine what they could do. So we have in our today's handout a few things. Okay, छोटा क्वेश्चन शुरू में ये है characteristics of the French Revolution. It's a very typical, it's a very small question. It has never been asked in the past, so I don't think they might ask, but let us cover the base. So it's a very generic type of question suitable for actually long answers. No more such questions are asked, but you should know. कि अगर कोई पूछे इसकी characteristic बताओ, so what all you say, because you know entire story, you know all the facts. You want to put into the analytical aspect of how do you write the answer. So here you have to give justification also in the form of evidences. But the ideas मैंने यहाँ पे लिख दिए हैं. For example, it was primarily, not completely, a bourgeois revolution, at least in the first and the third phase. But then overall, the masses were definitely involved in the process. Correct. The second point is it was not planned from day one. Why this point is important? Because French Revolution, although it set up a template for how to do revolution for the succeeding era in 1820, 1830, 1848, 1970, 1917, 1949, दुनिया भर में revolution के बाद revolution हो रहा है. 1979 also, if you want to include Iran. So how to include, how to do? अब क्या होता है French Revolution में? They did not start in aristocratic mind कि चलो let us change the government. No, they just wanted to solve some problem. अब बातों से बात निकल के इतना झगड़ा हो गया कि वो क्रांति ही हो गई. But in the succeeding era, now because they have set a template, people start with the intention of revolution. In 1848, they would come and say, let us start revolution, let us do it. How to do it? Let us plan. In 1917, when the Russian Revolution happened, there was a discussion for decades before that कि क्रांति socialist वाली कहाँ पे होगी. Marx said the revolution might happen in Britain because it is much more matured country with respect to industrialization. It has a very large working class. And it was never expected to happen in Russia, but the socialist revolution happened in Russia, and even in Russia, it was not natural. It was engineered. It was incited. It was designed to be a revolution. समझ रहे हो? तो बात ये होती है कि in case of French, we don't have a doctrine of revolution to start with. It was not a planned. It was series of events that ultimately, collectively, we call as revolution. A culmination of series of events. It was a violent revolution, no doubt. जैसे हमारे यहाँ बात होती है, दे दी हमें आजादी बिना खड़ग बिना ढाल, साबरमती के संत तूने कर दिया कमाल. So the similar point in India, what we have is a peaceful transition, peaceful transformation, relatively peaceful. There is no black and white here. A relatively peaceful transformation. But here, it is not at all peaceful. It is inherently bloody and violent. It was progressive in nature. मतलब क्या है? So inspired by vision of a better and brighter future, that point becomes important in the context. How we have, okay, that point becomes important in the context of the Enlightenment ideals. The Enlightenment ideals were themselves believing in the idea of progress. If you can remember a lecture, humanism, idea of progress, there is better tomorrow. Why and how? Because we can do it. So believe in the idea of progress and better tomorrow, and then bringing those value system today and trying to implement it. It is a progressive thought. In our Indian idea, progressive is generally aligned with left wing. In our today's politics, right? ये progressive लोग हैं. हमारे मराठी में होता है पुरोगामी प्रतिगामी. तो पुरोगामी आर प्रोग्रेसिव फॉरवर्ड पीपल, प्रतिगामी आर ऑर्थोडॉक्स कंजर्वेटिव पीपल. बट पुरोगामी आर लाइक लेफ्ट लिबरल जिसको हम कहते हैं आज के दिन. बट यू शुड नॉट यूज दोज टर्म्स एंड दोज कॉन्टेक्स्ट टू एनालाइज फ्रेंच, बिकॉज लेफ्ट राइट तो इसके बाद बनेगा. लेफ्ट राइट है ही नहीं ओरिजिनली यहाँ. That is the outcome. The other left and right terminological differences is the outcome, is the legacy of French Revolution that we today use. When you call anybody left wing, right wing, samjho, you are a child of French Revolution. It was a composite movement. Actually, should not be the word composite. It was a comprehensive movement. But ठीक है, चल जाए. Comprehensive movement. It touched political, administrative, social, religious, economic spheres of human life. So सब चीज में change. It is not only the question that we discussed. If you remember, in the case of American Revolution, yeah, is it a war of independence or is it a revolution? याद है? भूल गए. We had discussed this question. Now that question will no more be asked here. Not only because you don't have any foreign power ruling, but also because it is definitely revolution of some kind, of some intensity. Because it is changing every part of life, not only political independence. हम अगर ये होता कि अब राजा को हटा देते, बट सोसाइटी, इकोनॉमी, कल्चर, रिलीजन सेम रहता, तो पॉसिबल नहीं था. इट वाज ऑल एट वन पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. समटाइम्स आई फील वेरी ऑनेस्टली ना, इन लोगों ने बहुत बड़ा एजेंडा खोल दिया. एक दिन में हिस्ट्री, ज्योग्राफी, पॉलिटी, इकोनॉमी सब कुछ पढ़ लूंगा. पॉसिबल है पढ़ना एक दिन में आपको एज ए स्टूडेंट? नॉट पॉसिबल. सिमिलरली 25 साल में पूरी दुनिया चेंज कर दूंगा. तो आपने सिलेबस इतना बड़ा रख दिया और टाइम टेबल इतना श्रिंक कर दिया. इट इज नॉट एबल टू, it is not possible to do justice to everything. But they tried. That is a human ambition. It was characterized by ideological transformation during its course. So again, it did not start with one single ideology. We have seen the 4 phases, and all the 4 phases we have seen it transitioning from the constitutional monarchy to radical republican to liberal republican or moderate republican, and then come back to dictatorship of Napoleon. So you have all those things. It was not an isolated phenomenon. It was a part of the transatlantic revolutions. Now, when you say transatlantic revolutions, we have discussed this point also when we discussed the legacy or the consequences of American Revolution. It inaugurated the era of transatlantic revolution. देखा था हमने ये point? So what are those transatlantic revolutions? You start with America. On this side, you have French. बीच में आपका अटलांटिक तो है ही. Then अफ्रीका में कौन सा रिवॉल्यूशन हुआ? You come back to America, you have यहाँ पे Haitian revolution, Haiti का revolution. You have Latin America, where you have lots of revolutions under Simon Bolivar. यहाँ पे you have 1789, then you have 1820, 1830, 1848. You have Irish Revolution. You have lots of them. Decemberist uprising से लेके कई सारी चीजें हैं. So all these, some in Europe, the old world, some in the new world, Americas. You have एक यहाँ पे होगी, फिर यहाँ पे, फिर यहाँ पे, फिर यहाँ पे, चलता रहेगा. Chain of revolutions after revolutions continuously. The part inaugurated by American Revolution, French made it much more important. ठीक है? And then its impact was pan-European and not only in the context of. We'll see the point in itself because ये अपने आप में ही एक पूरा 15 marker, 10 marker, 20 marker question बनता है. The impact of French Revolution on the Europe, which we have already seen, हमने देखा है actually. उसको थोड़ा organized form में दोबारा देखेंगे अच्छे से. Clear? If I ask you the characteristics of French Revolution, बता दोगे? Now, depending on उसमें कितना पानी भरना है आंसर में आपको, you will give this 10-12 points. Then you will give examples after examples. ठीक है? तो now let us deal with this question directly. What was the legacy as such of this revolution, French Revolution? Let me open it over here. Legacy of French Revolution. I got a quote from Simon Skama. The French Revolution is the crossroads of the modern world. This is again, it's a very Eurocentric view. Europeans imagine, they understand कि यहाँ से दुनिया पहले अलग थी, अब दुनिया अलग हो गई. The early modern era is over primarily because of the ideas of enlightenment getting implemented during French Revolution. यहाँ से दुनिया बदल जाती है. मे भी उनके लिए बदली होगी, हमारे लिए तो भाई बहुत बुरे दिन शुरू हो गए इंडिया में. हमारे लिए तो अच्छे दिन खत्म होके बुरे दिन शुरू हो गए. बट अगेन इन यूरोसेंट्रिक मैनर, if you want to study history, then it is the beginning of the modernity for them, modern world. We live in on one side. All the issues that torment us can be traced back to the debates and the actions of that era. What it is to be a citizen, what limits there are on the state's power to write laws on your body, who can vote, what is property, what can be owned, what authority is, and how it can be overthrown. These questions were posed and for the most part answered in one momentous historical sequence. So, the nature of politics before the French Revolution and after the French Revolution is different. It did not change everywhere at the same time, but the change started. That's why even you look at the Enlightenment thinkers, do we study their political ideas in so detail nowadays? No. हमारे में सोशियोलॉजी, एंथ्रोपोलॉजी, पॉलिटिकल साइंस में हम किनके आइडिया पढ़ते हैं? दोज थिंकर्स हु केम इन 19th century and 20th century. Why? Because everybody before French Revolution is partly outdated. Why partly outdated? Because the structure of the politics is changed by French Revolution. Anyway, so the outbreak of the French Revolution opened the doors of modern age not only for France but for almost whole of Europe. This revolution transformed every dimension of human life and its echoes were heard far and wide. ये क्वेश्चन ऐसे सेंटेंस जो होते हैं ना, ये रटने होते हैं. Because when you get confused how to introduce लिख दो, ठीक है. And then if you want to reuse the statement for American Revolution लिखो. The outbreak of American Revolution opened the doors of modern age not only for America but for whole of the world. The revolution transformed every dimension of human life and its echoes were heard far and wide. वही लिख, क्या फर्क पड़ा? So my point is that if ideally I would not support such things, but if you are confused about how to introduce etc., it's a good start. You start with it. Gradually we'll develop the art of writing introduction on the spot. वो बाद में होगा. Now objectives and achievements. What we have done is a simple table of administrative, political, social, economic, religious objectives क्या थे और achievement क्या थी. So in the case of political administrative, absolutism was to be changed into constitutionalism. There was a demand for natural rights, separation of power, popular sovereignty. All these things are enlightenment ideas. Aristocracy to be replaced with meritocracy. Feudalism with equality. Arbitrariness with rule of law. यही तो डिमांड सारी थी enlightenment ideas की. What was ultimately achieved on the 4th of August? We know what happened in the charged atmosphere. मिराबो ने आके कागज फाड़ दिए रात में. 26th of August, we have Dr. Mack coming. Equality, rule of law, etc. Those ideas of political democracy, ideas of the political democracy were created. That is the hitting point. Absolute Bourbon dynastic rule was changed with constitutional monarchy, with republic, with Bonaparte monarchy. Again, the Bourbons came. So this is here we start criticizing कि देखो ये तो अच्छा हुआ लेकिन ये तो limitation है, कुछ हुआ नहीं ज्यादा. So legacy both completely positive and also somewhat under shadows. You go to society. Again, in society also, what was the beginning point? The beginning point was this 3 estates, and some of them having by birth some privileges and others are getting taxed. There is no equality. So class privileges and social inequality was to be destroyed and social equality was to be created. That was the very basic objective. And exploitation of the masses, discrimination was to be changed with fraternity, liberty, equality, fraternity. वही बातें बार-बार. The successfully destroyed the social system based on class privileges. Principle of equality was declared as the basis of the society. The objective of fraternity, however, would not be realized. Because you see lots of killings and bloodbath and violence, even within the city of Paris and entire Europe. In the case of Jacobin in Europe and Paris both, in case of Napoleon, again in Europe and Paris both. So it was not, अगर बंधु भाव होता, fraternity का मतलब क्या? बंधु भाव, बंधुता, भाईचारा, कहाँ भाईचारा है? Right? So on that level you can see कि भाई this system was not there. When Napoleon emerged as the head of the state, he tried to bring order. Actually, at some level, you can say at least within France, order came, so killing stopped, so fraternity came. But across Europe, the killings continued. But Napoleon की statement है कि what kind of society he envisages. When you talk about his reforms, उसने एक जगह कहा है पहले क्या था? We are grains of sand. What I want to create? A pillar of granite. फर्क समझो. हर आदमी, the very basic idea of enlightenment was individualism. हर आदमी individualistic है, उसके अधिकार है. Napoleon was against it. Napoleon was looking for the rights of the community and stability of community, not of individual. Therefore, he said, when you go for excessive individualism, होता क्या है? Grains of sand. बालू की जो कण होते हैं, उस तरह आप रहते हो. समाज थोड़ी हुआ, तो भीड़ हुई. What I want to convert that, अगर उसके you put that grains of sand into an adequate temperature, pressure and temperature, you create a pillar of granite. उसी से बना होता है. But you have a strength, the strength of community. There is no power of individual. The power is of community. So he said, I don't want grains of sand. I want pillar of granite. So for that, so anyway, I liked his phrasing very much. इसलिए बता दिया. In case of economic, unequal resource distribution. From there, they wanted to go to uniform taxation. Earlier, land ownership was unequal. The taxation was regressive. Then guild and mercantilism of the earlier era was to be replaced with free trade. It was a demand of the middle class. And then poverty, hunger, and unemployment of the sans culotte, the working class in cities, they wanted prosperity and some amount of modicum income at least. So economic privileges enjoyed by the nobles and clergymen were destroyed and uniform taxation was introduced. So on this level, the revolution definitely succeeded. It became a legacy of it. Mercantilist institutes like guilds were wiped out and a free economy was established. Yes, that also is there. Property of church was broken into small parts and sold to the peasants on easy terms, and whatever land the emigres, the feudal lords had left behind, that was also confiscated, appropriated, and distributed to people. So land distribution तो बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में. So when you say land reform, extreme level of land, but land reform कब होता है? उसके पहले एक prerequisite है. You have to abolish serfdom. Peasants should be free, not tied to the manor. So French Revolution, when on 4th of August destroyed feudalism, it also led to the abolition of serfdom. And now peasants are free. They need land. तो aristocracy and church का land भी उनको मिला. तो huge amount of land redistribution happened. ये भी property, ये भी wealth का distribution ही एक तरीके से. Rather यही तो wealth है, land. So, and then though economic crisis intensified in the first decade after the outbreak of the revolution, with the rise of Napoleon, the French economy started gaining health. That also we know. We have seen the assignments and the problem, the paper currency, everything, the price rise. And because that problem was not solved, constitutional monarchy to Jacobin to directory, transition होने में जनता का pressure नीचे से बहुत ज्यादा है. They are not willing to work because they are not able to solve the problem. So that problem was given. Napoleon क्यों आता है? One of the reasons is excess of all these economic problems not being solved. He is able to solve them. Then religious, we have the evils of church to be replaced. And then we wanted freedom of religion and tolerance and mutual coexistence. So destroyed the dominance of church and took away the privileges. Church has to pay taxes. The land is gone. Freedom of religion was granted to everybody. Church could no longer interfere in the personal life of the people against their will. Lynn Hunt ने एक जगह statement दिया है, the revolution created the secular free society that so many people around the world now associate with modernity. So that is a very true thing. Although in France, as we have discussed already, the idea of secularism went to the next level. जैसे कि इंडिया में देखो मंदिर है, मंदिरों कई सारे होते हैं गवर्नमेंट के कब्जे में. We have the debate going on free temple movement. Now उसमें ट्रस्ट बनता है. The trust is the one who collects all the money, दान दक्षिणा का. Trust employs the Guruji, Bhatji, Pandit, जो कुछ है वहां पे. So that payment of the person comes from the trust money. Trust money has got that money from the people's donation. तो ठीक है. But in France, अगर मंदिर होते तो मंदिर की जमीन, मंदिर की बिल्डिंग सरकार की होती. मंदिर का पुजारी गवर्नमेंट सर्वेंट होता. There would be civil entrance exam like UPSC to become Pandit in temple. Rest, I'm not joking. The syllabus will be determined by the government of the state. तो ये सब वहां पे हावी भी है. सो दैट काइंड ऑफ इन द पब्लिक डोमेन. हमारे यहाँ गणपति की पूजा होती है, अभी आरती चलेगी, चलेगी यात्रा, यात्रा जो कुछ है, शोभा यात्रा निकलती है अलग अलग किस्म की, मुहर्रम भी निकलता है, तो वहां पे अलाउड नहीं है. इफ यू वांट टू गो फॉर ऑल, यू नीड कंप्लीट पब्लिक परमिशन. अगर आप सरदार जी हो, आपको पगड़ी पहन के जाना है, घर में बैठना, ऑफिस में बैठना, यू आर नॉट अलाउड. पगड़ी आपका धर्म जताती है. धर्म जताने वाली कोई चीज जो रिलीजन इज प्राइवेट, घर के अंदर. नॉट टीका लगा के जाना अलाउड नहीं है रास्ते. क्यों? क्योंकि यू आर proclaiming in public sphere that you belong to certain religion. It is against secularism for them. चलेगा नहीं. तो हम Indian secularism is not that. But anyway, that as I think I told in life, उसको बोलते, उसका एक शब्द है. क्या शब्द है? The word that is used for the French version of secularism. What is the word for it? मैंने आपको क्लास में बताया था. Eyesight. Right? Anyway. After the French Revolution in 1815, we have something called as Congress of Vienna, which we will study today. So Congress of Vienna made every possible effort to wipe out the effects of these ideas, all these economic, social, religious, political ideas, but their impact on human thinking could not be removed. The awakening created by these ideas were responsible for the European revolutions of the 19th century. So you have got a fair bit of idea of how to write a critical answer. Some ideas were successfully implemented, some could not be, but ultimately in the long run they succeeded. ठीक है, ये अपना thesis रहेगा. Is it clear? Now, if a specific question is asked only on the case of modern politics, the French Revolution and the emergence of modern politics, तो आपको बस यहाँ का political part लेके आंसर नहीं बनेगा. You need more detailed argumentation. So we have a different heading for that. We have a very famous sociologist and thinker and philosopher, Jürgen Habermas. Jürgen Habermas ने कहा है, the intellectual legacy of the French Revolution was perhaps best expressed in the principles of universal human rights and popular sovereignty, which became central to the political and legal thought. So if anybody asks you what is the long-term political legacy of French Revolution, यही दो चीजें हैं, universal human rights and popular sovereignty. Who gives the idea of popular sovereignty? Rousseau. रूसो का जो आइडिया है सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का, जनरल विल, फ्रॉम देयर ओनली यू गेट द आइडिया ऑफ पॉपुलर सोवरेनिटी. सो हाउ इट चेंज द एंटायर पॉलिटिकल डोमेन? It encouraged nationalist, democratic, and republican thoughts. The divine right of kingship was abandoned forever, and sovereignty of the people was encouraged. The king can continue to exist, the monarchy may continue to exist, but it will be a constitutional monarchy. The king derives the power from the people, not from the god. The people are the sovereign. They are citizens, subjects. The transformation of a subjecthood into citizenry, that was the main political outcome of the French Revolution. Subject से लेके citizen बन गया. आप प्रजा नहीं हो, आप नागरिक हो. प्रजा is a negative term. प्रजा में you do not have agency. आप राजा के बंदे हो जाते हैं. कितना भी अच्छा क्यों ना हो, उसका बेटा क्या पता गारंटी नहीं अच्छा निकले. मैं कौन हूं? मैं प्रजा नहीं. सो इन द डेमोक्रेसी सब्जेक्ट नहीं होते, सिटीजन्स होते हैं. ठीक है, तो अगर कोई आके आपका पॉलिटिशियन कहता है आप तो मेरी प्रजा हो, समझो वो डिक्टेटोरियल टेंडेंसी रखता है, वो आपको ताकत नहीं देना चाहता. इट्स अ नेगेटिव टर्म आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में. इन द प्री मॉडर्न एरा, इफ सम किंग कम्स एंड सेज आप मेरी प्रजा हो, तो किंग इज फीलिंग अकाउंटेबल एंड रिस्पॉन्सिबल. दैट इज अ पॉजिटिव थिंग. बट इन द मॉडर्न एरा इट इज अ नेगेटिव थिंग. द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन ब्रॉट, so this statement is by Hannah Arendt, a very famous 20th century political scientist. उसने बहुत बनालिटी ऑफ एविल करके कॉन्सेप्ट लाई थी आफ्टर द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर. बट एनीवे, शी सेज the French Revolution brought an end to the Aristotelian notion of mixed form of government, the perfect government of the limited polis, and inaugurated the era of representative democracy. Now, you don't have to go into what was the Aristotelian form of government, but in the pre-modern era, there was no democracy. That is the point. Aristotle has created some tables and tossed forth different types of governments. वो कहता है कि यू हैव सम काइंड ऑफ जनता के लिए काम हो बट करने वाला राजा हो. प्रिस्टकन की बात करता है. सो यू हैव limited police, very limited people in the city who have right to vote, not all the slaves and everybody. And then that government is a perfect government. उसकी बात अब नहीं, जो जमाना खत्म, अब सब जनता की बात हो. तो you have representative democracy. ये आइडिया पहली बार अब शुरू होते. So even when you say the Greek city states had democracy, that democracy nothing in front of this democracy. That fails. पुलिस छोटा सा शहर होता है ग्रीक वाला, उसके अंदर सबको अधिकार वोटिंग के नहीं होते. देयर इज नो इक्वालिटी. यू हैव टू बी वाइट, यू हैव टू बी ग्रीक, यू हैव टू बी बॉर्न प्रॉपर्टीड एंड एलिट. ओनली देन आप पूरे शहर की समझो आबादी 10,000 है, उसमें से आधे तो गुलाम होंगे, उनको पिंजड़े में बंद कर देंगे, उनसे मजदूरी करवाएंगे. बच्चे आधे में से औरतों को हटा दो, आप बच्चों को हटा दो, तो जो 1,000, 1,500, 100, 500, 800 बचते हैं, दे आर दी पुलिस. एंड दे वो वोटिंग करते, डिस्कशन करते, वो कहते कि हमारा डेमोक्रेसी है. दैट इज द ग्रीक सिटी स्टेट डेमोक्रेसी. नाउ Hannah Arendt is saying that era is gone. What we have now is representative democracy, popular sovereignty. And you have historian Jonathan Israel. We have used him earlier also in case of American, if you remember, when I focused on the rule of ideas. The French Revolution gave rise to पॉलिटिकल नेशनल. तो आपको ये सारे कोट नहीं करने, भूल जाओ. आपको कोट करना पाओ कर सको, आंसर में यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू राइट यूर्गेन हेबरमास, हाना अरेंट एंड इजराइल एट द सेम टाइम. आपको मौका मिलेगा एक लिखने का. एंड डू नॉट मेमोराइज द कोट्स वर्ड बाय वर्ड, कोई जरूरत नहीं है. अगर आप ये भी कर लो ना कि हाना अरेंट हैज सेड दैट द इंटेलेक्चुअल लीगेसी ऑफ फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन वाज प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ यूनिवर्सल ह्यूमन राइट्स एंड सोवरेनिटी, तो भी किसी को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. कोई जगह चेक नहीं करने वाला, बिकॉज द आइडियाज आर मैचिंग. यू आर नॉट सेइंग कार्ल मार्क्स इज सेइंग यूनिवर्सल ह्यूमन राइट्स. कार्ल मार्क्स की बात कर ही नहीं सकता. कार्ल मार्क्स तो बात करेगा लोअर और प्रोलेटेरिएट की. तो एज लॉन्ग एज हिस्टोरियंस द थिंकर्स फॉल इन द सेम डोमेन, दे टॉक ऑफ सिमिलर आइडियाज एंड यू आर इंटरमिटेंटली चेंजिंग द नेम्स, इट इज ओके. बट किसी को आप लेकर कोई बात कर रहा हो लाइक बर्नार्ड बेलिन और समबडी on the other side of spectrum, and then you say कि उसने ये बात कही थी, तो पकड़ ले, आप पकड़े जाओगे. ठीक है. Then you go to extended aspect of it, that is a political popular participation. It consolidated the idea that the nation is composed of citizens, mostly citizen men at first, a fraternity or brotherhood that replaced a kingdom in which a monarch ruled his subjects. Before the revolution, there was a gap between government and society. This gap was reduced to a considerable extent after the revolution, as the various sections of the society, which till now had no role to play in government and its machinery, became active in politics. So India में ये कब होता है? When जनता becomes active in politics in India. नहीं, मैं सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. गांधी के आने के बाद primarily Gandhi is the one who takes the nationalism from the middle class nationalism to the elite nationalism or to the mass nationalism. So Gandhi brings that transformation in India. Here what you have is French Revolution. Then you have spectrum of ideology, left wing, centrist, right wing. All this terminology is the outcome of French Revolution. You have authoritarian instruments also, like plebiscite. Plebiscite लगता है कि डायरेक्ट डेमोक्रेसी है, नहीं है कई बार, बिकॉज थ्रू द प्लेबिसाइट देयर इज डायरेक्ट कनेक्शन बिटवीन एक आदमी एंड पूरी जनता बाय बाईपासिंग एंटायर इदारे जो होते संगठन आपके सत्ता के इंस्टीट्यूशंस ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट, सुप्रीम कोर्ट हो, पार्लियामेंट हो, निर्वाचन आयोग हो, इलेक्शन कमीशन हो, यूपीएससी हो, इन सबको हटाना है किसी को, मीडिया हो, तो एक आदमी ऊपर बैठेगा, जनता से डायरेक्ट बात. नेपोलियन ने क्या, वही तो किया. So sometimes that militates against actual democracy also, but Nonetheless, plebiscite was introduced during the French Revolution. Even Napoleon legitimized most of his actions based on plebiscite. ये जो आर्गुमेंट होता है ना, हमें वोट तो मिले हैं, तो हम जो कहेंगे वही सही होगा. It is majoritarianism. Plebiscite is one instrument of that. The excesses of Jacobin government, their use of guillotine, and the oppressive policy of Napoleon inspired future dictators also. They gave the idea कि अगर आपको दमन भी करना है तो कैसे करें efficiently, in a bureaucratized manner, how to go on mass killing. That also is a legacy of French Revolution in a political sense. And examples तो आपके पास already है कई सारे. Liberal nationalism, on the other hand, French Revolution encouraged liberal and nationalist thoughts, which had a great influence on Latin America and Asia. It played an important role in liberalization of the colonies also. We'll discuss that very soon. Revolutions all across Europe. It was a part of transatlantic revolution. So many revolutions which came in the wake of it were inspired by the ideals of French Revolution. So, ये भी है. So all these things, again, points are getting repeated, points are similar, they are bound to be similar क्योंकि हम question जो cover कर रहे हैं वो overlapping questions. Now we have one more question. Impact of, अगर specifically ये पूछा जाए, what was the political impact of the French Revolution outside France? Not political, but overall impact. So you would start like this. It was a pan-European phenomenon to start with. Its direct and indirect consequences were seen throughout Europe. If it's a 10 marker, this much introduction is enough. With a 20 marker, you go for longer introduction. There you have, with the outbreak of this revolution in France, not a single important event took place in Europe during the next 25 years that was not related to this revolution, directly or indirectly. That is why it is commented. There is some historian or some, I think, I don't know, maybe Metternich or somebody has said, with this outbreak, history of Europe merges into the history of one event, one nation, and one man. That event was French Revolution, that nation was France, and that man was Napoleon. In itself, it could be a different question. With its outbreak, history of Europe merges into one history of one event, one nation, one man. Discuss. Here you have to talk about the consequences, the impact of Napoleon and France on entire Europe. बस, और जो major चीजें बाद में घटती है, how they are traced back to one nation, one man, one event. वही देख रहे हैं हम. So this question, nothing but impact of French Revolution outside France in Europe. Discuss. So phrasing of the question can look complicated. Crux बड़ा simple होता है. ठीक है. Let us take the impact on the overall old world, the ancien regime. The ideological impact of French Revolution and changes brought by Napoleon started the process of decline of ancient regime in entire Europe. The curtain started coming down on divine rights, royal absolutism, aristocracy, feudalism, class privileges, inequality, medieval institutions, guilds, etc. तो ये सारी चीजें हमने फ्रांस में देखी थी, अब पूरे यूरोप में होना शुरू होती है, कंप्लीट नहीं होती. This entire 19th century is a long drawn out process of that happening. But इसकी शुरुआत, पहली चिंगारी जो है, तो यहाँ से आती. By the closing of the years of 19th century, these practices had disappeared in almost all of Europe. So it took 1 century. शुरुआत हो गई. By this, the French Revolution, there is one more thing. A transformation happened not only in a political way, it also happened in an economic way. Because once the absolutism and feudalism and guilds are destroyed, only then you can have the beginning of capitalism and industrial revolution. So in case of industrialization, Britain took lead because Britain में ये सारी चीजें पहले हो गई थी in the 17th, 18th century only. Europe fell behind. Europe lagged behind. Only when this kind of political changes happened did the scope arise, when the possibility of such industrial transformation could happen in Europe. So long term में the impact of French Revolution on Europe is also creating a background for transition into capitalism. But the more important point over here, the immediate point, the more visible and recognizable point is nationalism. The liberal and progressive ideas of French Revolution were propagated throughout Europe by the victorious armies of Napoleon. He initiated a number of political, socio-religious, and economic changes. So whatever reforms that are brought by Napoleon in the conquered territories trigger nationalism. But not only his reforms, but also his reorganizations. कि ये चार स्टेट जोड़ दो. Let me create Duchy of Warsaw. Let me create the Confederation of Rhine. Let me create the Kingdom of Westphalia. Let me create the Republic of Belgium. Let me continue with the Republic of Helvetica, मतलब स्विट्जरलैंड. Let me change some Piedmont. तो वो सारे स्टेट का जो जोड़ना तोड़ना कर रहा है, that is reorganization. And once that is done, inside that all the reforms he brings, which are the ideas of French Revolution. ये दोनों चीजें जो है, both of them trigger modern nationalism in those respective countries. For example, in case of Germany, it is completely, utterly divided. One vast chunk of Germany is under rule of Prussia. Another vast chunk of Germany is under rule of Austria-Hungary. And then outside both of these countries, you have another huge control of German speaking people, जो कि 300 अलग अलग देशों में बटे हुए, 300 देश, समझते हो? It's not easy. All this territory was lying between Prussia and France. उसके बीच वाला जो Rhineland का एरिया है सर. Napoleon conquered it. He destroyed all those 300 and converted them into, I think, 30 or some 30 or 20, 35. कितना number है? 39. 39. So when in future Bismarck will come to create a united Germany, he will have tackled with only 39 and not 300. So काम तो आसान कर दिया. He connected people with each other. So all these things. This greatly eased the future task of Bismarck, as he was required to merge only 39 states into one. The French Revolution was responsible for the emergence of spirit of nationalism in Europe. And now the third way. पहली बात थी the reform ideas. Second was reorganization. And third is Napoleon himself becoming exploiter, dictator, aggressor. तो anti-Napoleon feeling शुरू होगी. And that anti-Napoleon feeling becomes, भाई हम तो जर्मन है. जर्मन का मतलब क्या है? हम वो नहीं है. वो मतलब क्या नहीं है? फ्रेंच नहीं है. माने othering started. That othering was the fundamental idea behind the emergence of nationalism in Europe. European nationalism is defined on the basis of दुश्मन कौन है. You first identify the enemy, फिर साथ में आओ. It's all othering. That is, it's a very modern ideas come in binaries. दुश्मन कौन, फिर दोस्त कौन. So this othering was aided to a large extent. People got angry with Napoleon, and then they started to feel national consciousness among themselves. Italians came together against French. Germans came together, especially Germany and Spain. Spain में तो बात ही नहीं है. Spain could emerge as a modern nation partly because of Napoleon's issues. सब जनता साथ में आ गई. Peninsular Revolt, the Spanish ulcer. So you have these things. Thus, it helped usher in the ideas of nation state and the idea that the most important people within those nation states are the citizens. And so enthusiasts for freedom flocked to France from all corners of Europe, if not in person, then at least in their imagination. William Wordsworth, one of the romantic poets, का जो famous sentence, the bliss was it in that dawn to be alive and to be young was very heaven. उस समय में जिंदा रहना बहुत बड़ी ब्लिसफुल बात थी, आनंद की बात थी. और उस समय युवा होना मतलब समझ स्वर्ग मिल गया आपको. The same statement was used also by Pandit Nehru in his diary when he visited USSR. When he visited USSR, he saw, अरे यह तो कम्युनिस्ट रिवोल्यूशन हो चुकी है, कम्युनिस्ट क्रांति कितनी बढ़िया चीज है, ये मशीन लगी हुई है, 5 year प्लान है, ये है वो. So he was very happy, and then he wrote in his diary, this was तो सब कुछ है. So anyway, this line actually comes from the poetry of Wordsworth, where he talks about how it had surcharged rather, the emotions of people. And all these developments place France at the center of Europe. So intellectual ideas, dominant power, etc. That is why any incident taking place in France used to create echo in whole of Europe. So the second type of statement that you can have, now this statement is given by Metternich. He says, whole of Europe used to catch cold whenever France was sneezed. जब फ्रांस को छींक आएगी, पूरे यूरोप को सर्दी लगेगी. Why? क्योंकि ideas वहीं से निकलते हैं. And then they spread everywhere in 1830, in 1848, both 3 times, the revolution started in France first. And once it starts in France, पूरे दुनिया में आग लग जाती है. वहां अपनी अपनी क्रांतियां शुरू हो जाती. सो द स्टेटमेंट इज दैट whenever France sneezes, Europe catches cold. So you can see impact of French Revolution and Napoleon on Europe. Positive, negative, both. Is it clear? We seem to have some comment over here. Is the prevalence, acceptability of violence in politics also a legacy of French Revolution? The idea that the citizens as a whole can come together to overthrow an oppressive regime for the national good makes the goriness all the more palatable, normalized in a way. Personally, it is partly correct. See, politics has always been violent. Politics is about state, and state is about monopolization of violence. तो उसमें तो कोई बात ही नहीं है. State has to monopolize all the violence. अगर कोई और violence करता है तो नहीं चलेगा. So you are talking of two things here, two different things. One thing is the violence perpetrated by state on the people, and secondly, violence done by people against other people and the state. In the first case, it is, and second case rather, actually, both of them were justified in the unlegitimized in the name of high ideas of enlightenment by French Revolution. दोनों की legacy मिलती है हमें. जैसे state on the people, example Jacobin terror, and people on other people and state in the era before and after Jacobin terror. So revolution is something good or bad. इसके बारे में we don't have judgment, but it is bloody and violent. ये तो fact. There is hardly any peaceful revolution. So कई बार होता क्या है कि in ethics we study there is idea of double effect. Any action you do, it has got two effects, a good effect and a bad effect. Now अगर वो दोनों इफेक्ट एक ही इंसान पे हो, then the person may be able to judge कि भाई ये बैलेंस जब मैं करूंगा, बैलेंस शीट, is it good or bad. But let us say I do some action, आपके ऊपर बड़ा अच्छा इम्पैक्ट है, इनके ऊपर बड़ा खराब इम्पैक्ट है, पॉजिटिव फॉर यू, नेगेटिव फॉर यू, एंड नाउ यू आर टू जज. इफ यू बिकम द जज, व्हाट विल यू जज? ये तो बुरी चीज थी मैंने जो कही. इफ यू बिकम द जज, यू विल से अच्छी चीज करी मैंने. द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन अगेन, वायलेंस जिस क्लास पे होता है, फायदा जिस क्लास को होता है, इसमें हमेशा इंसिडेंस जो होता है एक आदमी पे नहीं होता. So that's why history is all the game of perspectives. Where you stand decides how you see the things. So for some sections, it was violent and therefore bad. For other sections, it was violent. It was a necessary and good violence. ठीक है. तो ठीक है. So did I answer the question? डॉक्यूमेंट तो ओवर हो गया वैसे, तो आ जाएगा. तो एनी अदर क्वेरी यू हैव? With this last discussion, our French Revolution topic is over. हर्ष, मैं फुल स्क्रीन नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ. फुल स्क्रीन, हाँ. कैसे बटन, ये कैसे करते फुल स्क्रीन? अच्छा, ये नहीं, वो वाला रीड मोड. हाँ, ये भी चलेगा ना भाई? अच्छा वाला नहीं है. हाँ, डिग्रेड, अपग्रेड का उल्टा डिग्रेड होता है. ठीक है, थैंक यू. So now we have to move onwards and enter into the 20th century, 19th century. Before I enter in 19th century, if you remember first lecture, I had talked about 3 overlapping themes that we'll cover for the entire 19th century. पहले तो we'll study the political story of Europe, starting from this Congress of Vienna, which comes in 1815, से लेके almost 1870s तक जाएंगे, 1880s तक जाएंगे, जहाँ पे we cover the mainstream domestic, rather continental developments in France. Then we come back to the beginning of 19th century again, and then we cover another theme, and that theme is economic theme, technological theme, industrial revolution in different countries and their consequences. The question that is asked in GS this time. And third thing, again we come back and discuss the concept and the application, rather the overall phenomenon of imperialism and colonialism and how it developed. All these 3 things are interconnected: the political, economic, and colonial. And therefore, when you see political, you will see some context of economic coming in. when you study economic, you see some context of colonization coming in, वो चलता रहेगा, but I cannot start everything at the same time. तो अगर कुछ confusion हो तो पूछ लेना, mostly confusion नहीं होता है, कोई problem नहीं आता. But we cover that, we trace the entire 19th century 3 times: political history, domestically, economic history, industrial revolution and the consequences, and then we go back to colonization and imperialism. ठीक है? And then we enter 20th century, the causes of World War I. बाद में हो. This entire part is very important. In this part, actually, there is an historian. I like his writing very much. Although I am not a Marxist, I'll be very honest. I don't like Marxist historians. लेकिन फिर भी, क्योंकि कई बार मतलब कुछ बहुत अच्छे होते हैं, no doubt. Some of them are very good, but some of them sometimes become very absurd also. And they write so technically कि उनकी भाषा ही समझ में नहीं आती. Terminologies they use are sometimes very complex. So, like dislike तो छोड़ दो, पहले समझ में तो आए क्या बोल रहे हैं. So anyway, but there is a very good historian. His name is Eric Hobsbawm. Eric Hobsbawm. He passed away, I think, a few years ago only. जब वो गुजर गए थे, उस समय in Indian politician, you will see the CPI people, Sitaram Yechuri, etc. They had tweeted their photo with Eric Hobsbawm. I was actually very happy that politicians still take pride in having been associated with intellectuals. After independence, वो धीरे 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 intellectual एक किस्म चले गए एक तरफ, politicians in India दूसरी तरफ चले गए. लेकिन 1960s 50s तक तो था कि politicians used to be intellectuals. शरद पवार को जानते हो आप? I had gone to attend his speech one day. I think 2007 या 8 की बात होगी. बड़ा पूरा हॉल भरा हुआ था. He was speaking on Aristotle. Think out. शरद पवार speaking on Aristotle. 2 घंटा he spoke on Aristotle. चलो मतलब I was myself, मैं बोला ये कैसे हो सकता है? But he then said, look at the transition happening in Indian politics. Before independence, the politicians themselves were intellectuals. वो खुद ही doctrines, ideologies, thoughts लेके आते थे, पढ़े लिखे थे. After independence in 60s, 70s and थोड़ा 80s तक, the divergence started. Politicians were no more intellectuals, but they valued intellectuals. So they used to get surrounded by authors and scientists and thinkers. Pandit Nehru is the archetype of that. He was intellectual of first phase also, and he used to be surrounded by intellectuals also, second phase. तो हमारे CM थे यशवंतराव चव्हाण, same person. He was not intellectual, but उनको कदर थी, तो सपोर्ट करेंगे, पैटर्नाइज करेंगे, साथ में लेके चलेंगे, बातें करेंगे, समझेंगे, साथ साथ चलते. Then after 80s, a third generation came, as per Sharad Pawar, where अलग तो है ही, कदर भी नहीं है. तो इंटेलेक्चुअल अलग रास्ते जा रहे हैं, पॉलिटिशियन अलग रास्ते जा रहे हैं. That is what he said. Anyway, मैं ये बात क्यों कर रहा हूँ, मैं भूल गया अभी. Come back. Eric Hobsbawm. So when he passed away, Sitaram Yechuri had tweeted a photo of him with Eric Hobsbawm. तो मैं थोड़ा लगा अच्छा, कदर है कुछ. So Eric Hobsbawm had written books. The 3 books की series थी, बाद में 4 किताबों की बन गई. When he talks of 19th century, he has used the term a long 19th century. For him, it starts in 1789, it ends in 1914. So the century is not of 100 years, but दोनों तरफ it overspills and becomes a longer century. Now, why is he saying that? Because he is not talking of the mathematical calendar, he's talking of historical phenomenon. The period that started in 1789 with the outbreak of French Revolution actually ended with the beginning of World War I. और ये सारे जो इवेंट्स पूरे बीच में घटते हैं, वो सारे इंटरकनेक्टेड सीरीज ऑफ कॉज एंड कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस एक ही थीम के अंदर होते हैं. इफ आई आस्क यू राइट नाउ अ कनेक्शन, व्हाट इज some connection? Is there any connection between French Revolution and World War I? दोनों के बीच में लगभग 130 साल का अंतर है. 130 years. 130 years ago हमारे यहाँ कांग्रेस बनी थी. 1885 की बात कर रहा हूँ. हमें विवेकानंद का स्पीच हुआ था 1894 शिकागो में. तब की उतना अंतर है between French Revolution and. तो अगर मैं आज आपको पूछूं कि what is the relation between Swami Vivekananda's speech in Chicago and your life today, just to appreciate कि distance of time कितना है, यहाँ पे आप appreciate करो और बताओ कि what is the connection. There are 2-3 main points. The first point is that conscription. Conscription as the idea started during French Revolution to save France against the coalition of European powers. That became a very major tool to create huge armies that created total war. तो destruction, violence जो World War I में हुआ है, उसका one major tool, the tool of conscription, emerged in French Revolution. The second thing is aggressive nationalism is the outcome of French Revolution. It is liberal all right, but it is also aggressive after a point. जब आप दूसरे पे हमला करोगे, आपके लोग खुश. French loved nothing more than glory. कहा जाता है. Napoleon brought them glory, so they became. चरण स्पर्श of Napoleon. Because Napoleon, how did Napoleon bring glory? By attacking other countries, by conquering other territories. तो उनका तो freedom चला गया. So such kind of aggressive nationalism which defines its self-identity by opposing somebody else is also the outcome of French Revolution. And that became a very fundamental cause of World War I. And the third thing is popular participation in politics. You see, I talked of the positive thing that you have now popular sovereignty, etc. But जब democracy आती है, representative हो, elections आते हैं, तो demagoguery भी आती है. You also have the need of the politics to appease the domestic vote bank. तो उसमें अगर जनता को कुछ डाइवर्ट करना है तो बाहर का इशू ले आओ, जैसे अभी किया किसने, जस्टिन ट्रूडो ने. अब उसकी वोट बैंक वहां साबुत नहीं है, परेशान बेचारा घर में है, तो क्या इंडिया को डिस्ट्रॉय द बायोलैटरल रिलेशनशिप. इट्स अ वेरी टिपिकल आउट. डेमोक्रेसी में ऐसे ही होता है. ये नहीं कि बस वो करते, हमारे लोग भी करते हैं. इन इंडिया ऑल्सो इन द पास्ट इट हैज हैपेंड समथिंग. जैसे कई बार इफ यू सी व्हाई 1962 वॉर हैपेंड, व्हाट वाज द रीजन इन 62 कि माओ को हमला करना पड़ा इंडिया पे? वन ऑफ द रीजंस इज दिस ओनली कि माओ डोमेस्टिकली वाज फेसिंग प्रॉब्लम because his policies, he want to divert attention of the nation, चलो इंडिया पे हमला करो. It's a very strong, one of the strong causes is this. तो ये शुरुआत कब होती है फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन? इसका वर्स्ट इंपैक्ट कब दिखता है? वर्ल्ड वॉर्स. So all these three tools, conscription, aggressive nationalism, and political appeasement of domestic vote bank, all these three things are the outcome of French Revolution, which became direct causes of World War I. Connection between 1789 1914. Long century. But this is not a sense in which actually Eric Hobsbawm has used the word. Eric Hobsbawm has used this term long century in some other context. He actually is trying to say that there are 4 or 5 themes which were inaugurated by French Revolution kept on unrolling till the beginning of First World War. One of them is nationalism. Other is industrial revolution. उसके साथ साथ चलती है. Third is representative democracy. Fourth is you have the socialist or a working class movements. Fifth is imperialism, technological change. तो ये 5 चीजें लेके चलता है ना. How this entire process is connected to one. So it's a one single historical period, the long 19th century. But again, I don't expect UPSC to ask this question कि explain or do you agree that it is called long 19th? नहीं, शायद नहीं पूछेंगे. But it is a very influential kind of idea. But what I want to say, in this long 19th century, we have covered the first 25 years. Now for the next of years, हम 3 बार जाएंगे. Nationalism का क्या हुआ? Industrial revolution and colonialism. And we'll cover the same story 3 times, overlapping. Let's start with the first part, nationalism. Let's start with the French Revolution, Congress of Vienna. After the defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of Leipzig, the victor powers assembled at Vienna. Vienna was the capital of Austria, under the leadership of the Austrian Chancellor Prince Metternich. It resumed after the defeat of Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. तो पहले आए, बात ही शुरू कर दी, बीच में नेपोलियन निकल के दोबारा आ गया. Second time war happened, and then they resumed the discussion. Now, what is the purpose? What is the intent for which they have assembled together? And it's very interesting. हुआ क्या है समझो. French Revolution and Napoleon's empire has unsettled many equations. For example, द आइडियाज ऑफ फ्रेंच, हमने अभी देखा इम्पैक्ट ऑफ फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन ऑन रेस्ट ऑफ यूरोप, उसमें मेजर इम्पैक्ट था आइडियाज ऑफ लिबर्टी, इक्वालिटी एंड फ्रैटर्निटी, जो कि अगर चली तो खिलाफ जाएगी किसके, सब राजाओं के, सब जमींदारों के, everybody will get destroyed. So this old guard, old word, the conservative people do not want that. Secondly, Napoleon had politically conquered most of Europe and subjugated it. Some part was attached to France, some part became its conquered area, some part was the kingdom was created. Some of his brothers were put on there as monarchs. तो पॉलिटिकल भी तो उसने पूरा मैप चेंज कर दिया था, उसको भी दोबारा करना है. तो द ऑब्जेक्टिव वाज टू फोल्ड. एक तो पॉलिटिकल रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन, we have to recreate the map of Europe altogether. And secondly, you have to suppress the ideas created by French Revolution. ये दो बड़े ऑब्जेक्ट, अगर ये दो नहीं करोगे तो आप भी उसमें बह जाओगे. So objectives of the Congress of Vienna was to create post-revolutionary arrangement order in Europe, to rearrange the map of Europe which had been disfigured by Napoleonic wars, to maintain the balance of power in Europe in order to avert the situation of war again in future. So what is this balance of power? Balance of power is a technical term. It's not a normal term. It has got a huge political science history. It was a European idea of conducting international relationship. After the Treaty of Westphalia in 17th century, as we have seen, emerged nation states. Similarly, with them emerged balance of power concept. Although the concept may be very old, but how we trace it today, we trace it from the Treaty of Westphalia. उसमें मतलब क्या है? मतलब ये आपका तराजू है, एक तरफ सब्जी एक तरफ वजन है, बैलेंस होना चाहिए, खत्म. अगर वो सब्जी बढ़ जाए, यहाँ के वजन बढ़ाओ. So if any single power in the continent is becoming powerful, it is becoming large, it is becoming hegemonic, तो फिर उसको आपको बैलेंस करना पड़ेगा. सब वीक पावर, सब नॉन पावरफुल पावर्स इकट्ठा बने, दे फॉर्म अ कोएलिशन एंड दे फाइट अ वॉर, ताकि कोई एक आदमी आगे ना चला जाए, कोई एक देश पावरफुल ना बने. If one country becomes powerful, it is presumed to be the threat for all other countries. कि जब powerful बनेगा हमको दबाएगा, ये लेके चलो आप. So whenever anybody becomes powerful, others come together, series of war, that country is put in place. So balance of power, power balance बना, शक्ति का संतुलन बने रहना चाहिए. शक्ति का संतुलन is balance of power, the literal translation. It is a way diplomacy or international relationship was conducted. Now it is inherently, idea क्या है? Idea है you want to have balance, you want to have equilibrium. But this idea is inherently unstable. It doesn't give you stable peace because कोई ना कोई आगे जाएगा, युद्ध करते रहो. You have no imagination that global diplomacy, the ideas of justice, ideas of morality, collective peace can also give you the same peace. No, युद्ध ही करना है. युद्ध करना किस लिए है? युद्ध रोकने के लिए युद्ध करना है. War to end wars. And that went to such a level of proportion. It is inherently unstable. It is not equitable. It is not equilibrium oriented. But it went to such an extreme proportion, it led to World War I. UPSC may ask a question that the balance of power became the reason behind World War I or something like that. हम देखेंगे उसको बाद में. But in 17th century, in 18th century, in 19th century, the doctrine of balance of power kept on evolving, kept on. The way through which it manifested itself changed in every century. Because some other nation was, sometimes Spain was very powerful. The balance of power अलग था. Then Britain and France emerged in 17th century to be powerful. The balance of power changed. Then in the 18th century के बाद 19th के शुरू में तो फ्रांस अब पावरफुल है. अब फ्रांस को रोकना है सबको मिलके. And then in the midst of 19th century, Germany will start becoming powerful. अब उसको रोकना है. तो हर जमाने में अलग अलग कंट्री पावरफुल बनती है, उसको रोकने के लिए अलाइनमेंट ऑफ पावर्स चेंज होता है, इंस्ट्रूमेंटेलिटी भी चेंज होती है. तो बैलेंस ऑफ पावर हैड ऑलवेज बीन अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट ऑफ यूरोपियन पॉलिटिक्स. अब उसको दोबारा आपको बरकरार रखना है टू मेंटेन द बैलेंस ऑफ पावर. अगर आपको इंटरेस्ट है, देन आई वुड रिकमेंड वन पर्सन. पता नहीं, एक बूढ़ा आदमी अभी तक मरा नहीं है. His name is Henry Kissinger. You know Henry Kissinger? He was American diplomat, advisor to the president in 1950s, 60s, 70s, especially during Cold War. 70s he was very active. अब वो आई थिंक उसकी उम्र 90 या 100 साल है. ही इज स्टिल अ लिविंग जायंट in the world of diplomacy. Realism के बारे में he has written couple of books. वर्ल्ड के बारे में इस बुक आई हैड read his book called Diplomacy. The name of the book itself was Diplomacy. Fantastic book. बैलेंस ऑफ पावर समझना है तो आपसे पढ़ो. बड़ी मोटी किताब है बट एनीवे आपको वैसे यू डोंट नीड इट फॉर ऑप्शनल, ऐसे ही बता दिया. And the third thing was to suppress the ideas of French Revolution and to crush the ideas of liberalism and nationalism, which threatened the stability of Europe. So, one side you have to change the territorial rearrangement, territorial reorganization. You have to bring the balance in that power, and then you have to suppress not only change in map, but also change in ideas. तो कैसे करें? So their program was quite simple. हाँ, एक पॉइंट रह गया. These ideas of French Revolution and especially the idea of nationalism, उससे डर किसको था? डर उनको था जिनके टुकड़े टुकड़े हो सकते थे. If there is Prussia, so Prussia is largely German-speaking region. It is not afraid of that. Italy, it is fragmented. It wants nationalism to come because if it comes, Italians will want to become united. It will create one state. Lekin think of Austria, Hungary. Austria is an empire which is definitely inherently multiracial, multilinguist, multi-ethnic. उसमें कोई एक जनता जैसे इंडिया की तरह यहाँ पे कितनी डाइवर्सिटी ऑफ पीपल एथनिसिटी में है उतनी ऑस्ट्रिया में थी. सम मग्यार, सम पोल, सम ऑस्ट्रियन, सम हंगेरियन, सम जर्मन. अब उसमें देयर वाज नो पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ वन एथनिसिटी बिकमिंग 90% एंड दैट बिकमिंग अ नेशन. अगर वो होता तो वो खुश होते. बट इफ नेशनलिज्म कम्स इन द मल्टी एथनिक, इट्स यूरोपियन, इट्स नॉट इंडियन नेशनलिज्म. अंडरस्टैंड, यूरोपियन नेशनलिज्म अलग होता है. इसमें यू हैव टू हैव सेम एथनिसिटी टू बिकम वन नेशन, अदरवाइज यू बिकम माइनॉरिटी. अगर ऑस्ट्रिया के अंदर सारे एथनिसिटी स्टार्ट बिकमिंग फीलिंग दैट दे आर वन नेशन, तो टुकड़े टुकड़े होना लाजमी है. सेम थिंग विद ऑटोमन्स. ऑटोमन एम्पायर हैड अंडर इट क्रिश्चियंस एंड मुस्लिम्स, अरब्स, अफ्रीकन्स एंड यूरोपियंस. अब ये तो रहने बचने से रहा. एंड सेम थिंग विद रशिया. रशिया के अंदर भी यू हैड मल्टीपल नेशनैलिटीज, multiple ethnicities. Russia went multiple times for Russification. सबके ऊपर एक लैंग्वेज, जैसे हमारे यहाँ कोशिश होती है सब लोग हिंदी बोलनी चाहिए. जिस दिन वो होगा देश के टुकड़े हो जाएंगे, गारंटी है. बिकॉज दैट इज द एंटायर वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री एक्सपीरियंस. अपने एरिया में हुआ है. यानी उर्दू इम्पोज, बांग्लादेश अलग देश बन गया? नहीं बना बांग्लादेश, अपने अपने ही लोग थे वो. इट्स नॉट यूरोपियन में हो, हमारे यहाँ नहीं होगा, हमारे यहाँ भी हुआ है. तो माई पॉइंट इज दैट when a nation is multi-ethnic, उस समय ऐसे हम उसको आज के दिन में बोलते हैं सेपरेटिज्म, सब नेशनलिज्म, because we think of India as an important aspect. So you think of you as an Austrian. अगर आप ऑस्ट्रियन चांसलर हो, मेटरनिक, एंड आपको बट यू आर नॉट डेमोक्रेसी, यू आर ओल्ड स्कूल, यू आर autocracy, rather you are monarchy, and then different ethnicities are there. You are afraid of the French ideas of nationalism. अगर जिस दिन वो होगा तो मेरी पूरी जद्दोजहद यही होगी इन आइडियाज को रोके. जहां जहां कोई यूनिवर्सिटी बनती है जेएनयू टाइप, अगर कोई ऑस्ट्रिया में वियन्ना में स्टूडेंट्स बहुत ज्यादा नारे लगाते सप्रेस करो, बंद करो. अगर कोई सीक्रेट संगठन बनता है, मुकदमे चलाओ उनके ऊपर. अगर वो नहीं करोगे तो देश टूटना पक्का है. बिकॉज यू आर नॉट. इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में फर्क इतना ही है, वी आर अ डेमोक्रेसी. And secondly, our nationalism is not of European kind. Our nationalism is not anti something. We are inherently inclusive. Inherently. फर्क पता है, when India's partition happened, as I always say, nobody expected India to survive. Because of what reason? Because of not only illiteracy and health problems and experience नहीं था, because of this one reason primarily. इतनी डाइवर्सिटी के बाद नेशन बनता ही नहीं है दुनिया में. दुनिया में literally there is not a single nation in the entire world which has so much ethnic diversity where no population is balanced. I mean, go to China में क्या 90% Han Chinese. Go to Russia, majority Slav people, they dominate everywhere. इंडिया में नहीं है. तो everybody in the world said इंडिया तो डूबना टूटना पक्का है within 2030. इंडिया बचा, ये अपने आप में ही बड़ा मिरेकल है. and not joking. We take India for granted, we should not. लोगों ने बहुत जद्दोजहद की तब देश बचा हुआ है after partition. But in partition also we saw differences. In case of Pakistan, somebody said Pakistan, I think Ram Guha himself has said in one interview many years ago, Pakistan is a perfect European nation. Why? It has one religion, Islam, one language being imposed on everybody, Urdu, and one enemy, India. And these three things are the identifying markers of European nationalism. One language, one religion, जहां तक हो सके वहां तक, and having one strong enemy. अगर एनिमी नहीं है तो आपकी सेल्फ क्राइसिस, आइडेंटिटी क्राइसिस हो जाएगा वहां पे लोगों. हाउ कैन आई नॉट हैव एनिमी? इफ वन एनिमी इज डिस्ट्रॉयड, लेट्स इन्वेंट अ न्यू एनिमी. उसके पीछे चलेंगे आप. तो the point is, this Austria especially, because of it being multi-ethnic, was afraid of these emerging ideas of European kind of nationalism. So, and Vienna is the capital of Austria. So Metternich had a huge role to play in shaping this Congress of Vienna. To maintain the principle of legitimate rule, कोई भी उठ के राजा कैसे बन सकता है? खानदान का आदमी चाहिए. You should come from the dynasty only, then हो सकता है. It may happen that you don't come from the main dynasty, you come from a small dynasty. कोई गांव के आप जमींदार हो, कोई दिक्कत, जमींदार तो थे, आप राजा बनो चलेगा. सामान्य आदमी उठ के नहीं बनना चाहिए. So the fortunes of the houses may go up and down. That is fine. That is fine. But you should come from some long-standing house. You should have legitimacy of rule. कोई भी उठ के नहीं बनेगा. No democracy, no republicanism. Only that person can be head of the state who has that house. Then balance of power to maintain the status quo in Europe and eliminate the possibility of war. I have discussed this already. And to prevent emergence of any one strong state from becoming too dominant. And then third thing is principle of rewarding the victors. Why don't reward the victor? Because Napoleonic wars में Austria and Prussia especially lost a lot of territory, lost a lot of income, lost a lot of people. So they thought कि हमें खुद को compensate भी करना चाहिए. So compensation element was also there. इतना युद्ध किया है, कुछ तो मिले अंत में. So these are the three principles which shaped the overall decision making in the Congress of Vienna. Is it clear? Who were the major powers which came there? We have victor parties consisted of Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. देखो हम 3 बार देखेंगे ये चीज, 3 times. Once in the case of Congress of Vienna, second in the case of Treaty of Versailles, Peace of Paris after World War I, and third what happened after World War II, Potsdam and Yalta, etc. तो 3 बार हम देखेंगे कि after major war, major power came together and tried to recreate the entire world order. तो तीनों में हमें पॉलिटिक्स क्या हुआ, नेगोशिएशन कैसे हुए, क्या डिसाइड हुआ देखना है. सवाल आते because the decisions they take have long term implications. We have some question over here apparently. Did Napoleon contribute to colonization outside Europe and North Africa directly or indirectly? Napoleon actually was primarily continent oriented. ये फर्क है, पता है, ब्रिटेन एंड फ्रांस में. Britain never wanted to get foothold in the continent. It wanted balance of power. कोई पावरफुल होगा तो ब्रिटेन पीछे से जाके बाकी को उकसाएगा कि देख वो पावरफुल हो रहा है, आई विल प्रोवाइड यू मनी, आई विल प्रोवाइड यू सपोर्ट, बट यू गो एंड फाइट. ब्रिटेन ने हमेशा, बट ब्रिटेन डिड नॉट वांट अ लैंड ऑन द कॉन्टिनेंट. ब्रिटेन इज मोर ओरिएंटेड टुवर्ड्स कॉलोनाइजेशन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. फ्रांस ने भी दुनिया भर में कॉलोनाइजेशन किया, अमेरिका में किया, अफ्रीका में किया, एशिया में किया. But ultimately, there came many generations in France which were inward looking. They were more towards continent than towards colonization. That is one thing. Secondly, Napoleon did not have army, did not have navy. So at the time of Napoleon, there is French Empire. But Napoleon's contribution to the increase in empire is almost nil or minimal. उसका कोई ज़्यादा रोल नहीं रहा है. उसका पूरा फोकस रहा है within continent. So these are the 4 major powers. All these nations were dominant in the proceedings of the Congress of Vienna. However, this whole system that was created out of it was known as Metternich System because it was happening in Austria. Austria's stakes were very high. And Metternich was Austrian chancellor. He took a lot of efforts. So this is the map. This is the map that is recreated. Rather than having so many states, so ठीक है, मैप में आपको रटना तो ज्यादा है नहीं, but let me tell you this blue thing is Austrian Empire. This dark green is Prussia, and light green is different general German states, confederation of German states. So Germany कहाँ कहाँ बटा हुआ है? Austria is also outside Germany in other parts. Hungary है यहाँ पे, बाकी सारी चीजें, and France. ठीक है. So let us try to understand what all did they do. अब ये मैं जो आपको टेबल बनाया हूँ, if you want to memorize, you can memorize. There have been 1 or 2 questions in the past where they asked about the territorial arrangements. But आपको सारे examples you don't need to memorize. 1 or 2 examples are enough. What we have done is on the left hand, principles are mentioned, and on the right hand, the examples are mentioned. Example एक एक काफी, एक दो, ठीक है. Principles आपको समझने हैं. First thing is you have to go for balance of power. In balance of power, you have to cut France to size, and on all the borders of France, you have to create strong states. So to ensure that a powerful France doesn't re-emerge, and if at all it re-emerges, it is now surrounded by the powerful states. उसके आसपास किनारे पे जो सारे states उनको बड़े बड़े जमीनें देके एरिया बढ़ा के पावर बना दो उनकी, make them strong, so it cannot attack Austria or Prussia directly, or even England in future. So Belgium merged with Holland to form Netherlands to check future expansion in that direction, because this is a low country. If you want to attack France, attack Britain, you have to go via this region. It became a kind of strategic depth, not depth, but front of Britain. Excuse me. Switzerland's permanent neutrality was recognized. Norway was separated from Denmark and merged with Sweden. Genoa was given to Piedmont Sardinia in Italy to prop it up against possible future French aggression. Thus, Piedmont Sardinia's territory was enlarged and became a powerful state. So these are all the states on the borders of France. Most of them, उनको उन्होंने large कर दिया. The second thing is the principle of legitimate rule. यहाँ पे dynasties replaced by the forces of revolution were restored. Especially the rule of Bourbon dynasty was restored in France, in Spain, in Naples and Sicily, the 2 Sicilies. House of Savoy was restored in Piedmont Sardinia in Italy. House of Orange was restored in Holland, and the rule of Pope was restored in central Italy, the papal domains. तो ये सबों को नेपोलियन ने हटा के अपने भाई बहन लगा दिए थे, बहन नहीं भाई लगा दिए थे. तो now they are now legitimate rule, उनकी ही legitimacy है. The third thing is the principle of rewarding victors. हमें भी कुछ मिले. So Russia was rewarded with Finland and most of the Poland. Not Poland के बड़ी दुर्दशा रही है हमेशा. When I was going for my masters, discussing with my professors कि भाई मास्टर के लिए जाऊं, तो which professor there will be good guide for me. So a good professor from IIT Kharagpur told me, he was a very insightful professor, but he gave a very racist comment. उसने कहा don't ever have either Indian guide or a Polish guide. Indian guide would ensure कि तू इंडिया वाला है, तू लगा कि मेरा भाई अच्छा मेरी मदद करेगा, सबसे अधिक खून वही चूसेगा तेरा. So never have Indian guide. And why not Polish? He said because Polish are foolish. तो मतलब ये क्या बात हुई, ऐसे थोड़ी बात. But anyway, I never met a Polish guide, तो बात ही नहीं उठी. But Indian guide मैंने फिर avoid किया, and it came out to be true. So Polish. Anyway, most of the Poland, Prussia was given parts of Rhineland and Saxony. Austria was given North Italian territories of Lombardy and Venetia. तो ये जो सारी चीजें है ना, Rhineland and Saxony and Prussia, Lombardy, Venetia, all these names will come again and again in our syllabus next week when we study the unification process. तब मैं connect करूंगा इन सब चीजों को, then we'll remember them very easily. To suppress the feeling of liberalism and nationalism which were generated by French Revolution, especially in Germany and Italy. जर्मनी को हमेशा कहा गया है इन 19th सेंचुरी अ स्लीपिंग जायंट, सोया हुआ शेर है, स्लीपिंग जायंट, सबको पता है. इफ द फ्रेंच स्पीकिंग कैन बिकम फ्रांस, इफ द इंग्लिश स्पीकिंग कैन बिकम इंग्लैंड, व्हाई नॉट जर्मन स्पीकिंग बिकम जर्मन? देयर कैन बी, देयर विल बी. अगर जिस दिन जर्मनी जाग उठेगा, कम से कम 10-20 एम्पायर तहस महस हो जाएंगे. तो एंटायर यूरोप ऑलरेडी न्यू इट्स अ स्लीपिंग जायंट. यहाँ पे नेशनलिज्म फैलना नहीं चाहिए. अगर होता है, ऑस्ट्रिया गया, प्रशिया गया, इतने सारे 30-40 स्टेट भी चले गए, सब दिक्कत, बैलेंस ऑफ ऑल डिस्ट्रॉयड. So Germany was a sleeping giant, and in the Central Europe, if it was awakened, it would become a major threat to many existing empires and balance of power both. तो वो कैसे रोके spread of German, spread of ideas? So Germany was earlier reorganized by Napoleon into 16 bigger states of Confederation of Rhine, but the Congress of Vienna tried to 16 नहीं था, क्या नंबर था उसका? 39 था ना, 39 bigger states. But the Congress of Vienna tried to divide it consciously. उसने वो 300 के 39 तो कर दिए, 38 थे मेरे ख्याल, 38 + 1 प्रशिया, 38 + 1 मिलकर 39 बनता है शायद, बट एनीवे कोई बात नहीं, 39 टोटल है. बट उसमें 38 अदर स्टेट से और एक प्रशिया से कुछ है शायद, इट डजंट मैटर. नाउ आइडियली द कांग्रेस ऑफ वियना वुड हैव लव्ड टू गो बैक and divide them into again 300, but nobody knew घंटा की किसकी बाउंड्री कहाँ पे, कौन सा गांव यहाँ पे, कौन सा गांव वहां पे, कौन सा रास्ता, कौन सा टैक्स, कौन सी करेंसी. इट्स ऑल कंफ्यूजन. बोले ठीक है, कोई दिक्कत. सो बिगर स्टेट्स ऑफ, बट द हाँ, with this purpose the confederation was dissolved into pre-revolutionary 38 states, no longer under French control. Simultaneously Austria was made the guardian of the supervisor of the region. तो उन्हें 38 states रखे, and Austria was made the guardian, and they formed no more this term Confederation of Rhine. Instead, what they have is German Confederation. So a new kind of reorganization. You can see in the map also, जो map दिया हुआ है उसमें जो एक लाइन खींची लकीर है से, that is the Confederation of Germany. देखिए, so big and small was created. It continued till 1848. Austria and Prussia had significant influence within the German Confederation. So that is one reorganization, ताकि अगर इतने सारे स्टेट साथ में रहे, they will do check and balance. Austria and Prussia both will play some role. They will also check and balance each other. तो वो होने ही दे देंगे प्रचार ऑफ नेशनलिज्म. The second thing is Italy. Italy, यहाँ भी Napoleon had two things. He had removed old institutions. He had carried nationalism internally, unified Italy, everything, and again some reorganization. यहाँ भी it remained geographically divided so that it should not rise as a nation in the future. With this purpose, Lombardy and Venetia in northern Italy were placed under Austria, Parma, Modena, Tuscany under Habsburg dynasty, and in southern Italy, Naples and Sicily, the king of Bourbon dynasty was placed. तो अब ये सारा याद तो नहीं कर पाओगे, जरूरत भी नहीं है, हर एक में एक एग्जांपल लेके चलो बस. So this was the reordering of the European map that was done. But the point is how to ensure its sustenance in future. Here comes another aspect, and a very interesting aspect, the aspect of Metternich System. He created institutions to ensure कि ideas ना फैले तो दबाए जाए. So you have Metternich, the Prince Metternich was the Chancellor of Austria. He was a complete reactionary. This term is to be used in your answers again and again if the question is he was a reactionary. मतलब क्या होता है? What is reactionary? कुछ तो बताओ यार. No. Reactionary means if you bring some kind of positive change, progressive idea, उसके खिलाफ जाएंगे. They want to go back to old system. Conservative, aggressive conservativeness. कोई बदल नहीं आने देंगे. जैसे बूढ़े चाचा कोई होते हैं ना, घर में ये कपड़े नहीं पहने जाएंगे, घर में ये चीज खरीदी नहीं जाएगी, ये खाने की चीज थोड़ी है, रोटी बनाओ. रिएक्शनरी. ठीक है. नाउ जस्ट गिव मी अ मोमेंट, आई विल कम बैक. take a break for a minute. Okay, thank you. So he was a reactionary. If you want to reduce the history of Europe of 19th century to three people, in the beginning you have Napoleon. Then in the first half of 19th century till 1848, you have Metternich. And then from 1848 onwards till 1890, you have Bismarck. तो कहानी बस तीन लोगों की कहानी है, नेपोलियन टू मेटरनिक, मेटरनिक टू बिस्मार्क. इन तीनों लोगों के एरा में क्या क्या पॉलिटिक्स होता है. It also shows who is sitting in the driver's seat. France, then Austria, and then Germany. We'll see other people also. We have lots of Mazzini hai, Cavour hai, lots of people are there. We don't study generally British thing. वरना Palmerston तो पढ़ते ही पढ़ते, Israeli पढ़ते. These are important people from the foreign policy viewpoint. But British foreign policy is not. But they are important people. Anyway, तो हमारी स्टोरी जो है वो है बस नेपोलियन से लेके मेटरनिक, मेटरनिक से लेके बिस्मार्क. तो मेटरनिक में एंटर कर रहे हैं. In the post-Napoleonic decades, there was a conflict between the forces of continuity and the forces of change. So, what are the forces of change? The French ideas of revolution, the liberalism, the nationalism. You have also the ideas which are more materialistic in orientation, like industrial revolution. You know, Eric Hobsbawm, the same Marxist British historian, had actually used the term twin revolution. 19th century में क्या होता है? There are twin revolutions. One is French Revolution and other is Industrial Revolution. Collectively, he called them a twin revolution. दोनों जुड़वा भाई है और दोनों मिलके ही सारा चेंज लाते हैं. सही बात है. So we have all these things which are forces of change. They want to destabilize, change anything, but other people want the old things to continue. They are called as forces of continuity. And उनका जो doyen है, the doyen of force of continuity is Metternich. बदलना नहीं चाहिए, पुराना रखो. So now, when the French Revolution was on the horseback with Napoleon going everywhere, the force of change were dominating. Now, from 1815 till 1850s, ये 35-40 साल आएंगे, सिस्टम उल्टी हो जाएगी. For next two generations now, the continuity के लोग पावर में रहेंगे. They want no change. Anywhere the change starts happening, they will go and actively suppress it. But subterranean level पे change होते ही रहता है. वो इतना होगा कि एक दिन उगल जाएगा, फिर सब टूट तहस नहस. वो बाद वाली कहानी. So the forces of continuity were represented by monarchy, aristocracy, and the church, while the forces of change were represented by liberalism and nationalism on an ideological plane, and industrial revolution and growth of population on the material basis. The conflict took place during the 1820, 1830, and 1848. Metternich was guided by the interest of multi-ethnic empire like Austria, which was threatened by the idea of rising nationalism. It questioned the unity and integrity of the empire. अगर यहाँ पे इंडिया में अगर हर स्पीकर ऑफ लैंग्वेज, हर लैंग्वेज कहीं में अलग देश हो, उपड़े होना, देयर इज नो अदर ऑप्शन. तो यहाँ पे सिमिलर बात थी. So Metternich followed the policy of check and balance among the people from different nationalities and preferred to create a cleavage among them. The difference between India and Austria is that, first of all, I said India is a democracy. Austria was a monarchy, backward looking, not progressive. The second difference in India, to unite the people, we create peace and justice. हर एक को अपना अधिकार मिलता है. वहां पे क्या? Check and balance. इनके चार लोग लिए, उनके चार लेके इनको दबाओ. For example, you have two ethnicities. So in one ethnicity, for policing purpose, you recruit the police from the other region. And वहां के region में पुलिस करना है तो यहाँ के लोग लगा दे. This is not the game to play. ये but this is what he did. He is backward looking. उसके लिए पता है असली what was the better way for him? He should have ideally accepted diversity. But European nationalism doesn't accept diversity. And he was a diverse empire. So how to question उसके सामने क्या था? ये था diversity is not getting empowered, getting nationally conscious. How to accommodate that and still remain united? ये सवाल मैं आपको पूछूं तो उसके दो जवाब बनते हैं. One is accommodate करो ही ना. You go backwards. You suppress the ideas of modernity जो उसने किया. That was a wrong thing to do. he could ensure peace for 30-40 years, but जो होना है, भले ही वो 2 जनरेशन बाद क्यों ना हो, जो अटल है होनी है, तो देश टूट गया उनका। देयर वाज अदर, इट्स ऐसे नहीं कि हम हाइंडसाइट में बोल रहे हैं, हाइंडसाइट में विजडम देना बड़ा आसान होता है, उस समय ये किया होता तो अच्छा होता। उसके समय भी ही हैड एक्सेस टू डिफरेंट मॉडल्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट, वो अगर करता तो सही होता। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ही कुड हैव गॉन फॉर ग्रेजुअली ट्रांजिशन टुवर्ड्स रिप्रेजेंटेटिव डेमोक्रेसी विद कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की, वोटिंग लेके आते, राजा के पावर धीरे धीरे कम होते, जो इंग्लैंड ने किया वो कर सकता था, देश बचा रहता। But one difference between England and multi-ethnic Austria was that Austria was much larger and much more ethnically diverse. To accommodate ethnic diversity, you have a different model, federalism. It is being implemented in America, in Canada. Federalism लेके आओ, हर रीजन को अपने अपने अधिकार दो, प्रोविंसेस को पावरफुल बनाओ, create a central government and state government. Now, had he brought representative democracy and had he brought federalism, Austria would have survived, possibly. But old guy, in दोनों केसेस में होता क्या है, he would have to let go of his own powers. The old aristocracy, the old church and the old kingdom will let go of powers. खुद की सत्ता खुद से थोड़ी आदमी कम करता है, खींचनी पड़ती है, सिंपल। So ultimately he went the other way around. He tried to turn the clock backwards. समय के घड़ी जो है, he tried to do उल्टी दिशा में. He failed in the long term. What he did, how he tried to do that, उसके लिए first of all you to understand the forces of change क्या थे. Let us go into details of them, थोड़ा सा understanding. First is liberalism. Liberalism started in the 18th century, in the 19th century, 17th 18th century. Now it became very popular. आइडिया क्या है, सिंपल है, मिडिल क्लास के रिक्वायरमेंट है, लिबरल डेमोक्रेसी वाले, यू वांट लिमिटेड मोनार्की, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म, यू वांट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव गवर्नमेंट, लासे फेयर इकोनॉमी, फ्री ट्रेड, इंडिविजुअल फ्रीडम, ह्यूमनिज्म, ऑल दिस थिंग्स आर लिबरल थिंग्स. तो इनका जो प्रचार करते लिबरल होते हैं. इन अदर वर्ड्स वन कैन से दैट व्हाट इज कैपिटलिज्म इन इकोनॉमिक फील्ड एंड इंडिविजुअलिज्म इन सोशल फील्ड इज लिबरलिज्म इन द पॉलिटिकल फील्ड. And these three things generally go together. Generally, they go together. Because unless and until you are equal citizen with one voting right, how can be equal market? Market में equal कैसे होगे? Market में equality, society में equality, and politics में equality साथ साथ चलती, क्योंकि इंसान तो बीच में एक ही खड़ा है. Now, this is what was our dominant assumption till recent time. Now it has started to change. Perhaps it is too early to judge. But if you go by the example of China, China में there is social and economic liberalism, capitalism है, but political नहीं. It's a wonder in the world कि कैसे manage कर रहे हो. See, there are lots of explanations for that. Confucianism, one party state कैसे काम करते हैं, learn from the USSR का fall वगैरह, हम उनको देखने की कोशिश करेंगे थोड़ा थोड़ा. But that is exception. In the rest of the world, especially in the Western world, इकोनॉमिक सोसाइटी पॉलिटी में तीनों साथ में चलता है. लिबरलिज्म इन पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर, इंडिविजुअलिज्म इन सोसाइटी एंड कैपिटलिज्म इन इकोनॉमी. तो विदाउट डेमोक्रेसी कैपिटलिज्म नहीं चल सकता, समझो आप. इन द वेस्ट, दैट इज द assumption. That was the outcome of historical wisdom of 18th and 19th century. Then the second force is the force of nationalism. The nation denotes a community of people linked to each other through land, history, ethnicity, language, etc. It is the product of the historical force. Now, यहाँ पे भी ना, I don't know how much in detail I should be taking all of you, but how does a nation state emerge? राष्ट्र जो संकल्पना है, थोड़ा सा you have to take it as a student of history and not of being a person of any nationality. The debate in social science कि nation ये असली है झूठ है. If you have read Eric Hobsbawm, we all know it's झूठ. सफेद झूठ है राष्ट्र संकल्पना. सफेद बस राष्ट्र नहीं, मनी, इसके हम ट्रेड करते हैं, मनी सफेद झूठ है, रिलीजन सफेद झूठ है. These things are make believe things. If all of us believe it, it becomes true. There is no evidence. It's about community believing in them, and it is a very, it's what मतलब you should read. You will know हमारा किताब सेपियंस में बहुत अच्छा लिखा है उसने इसके बारे में, कैसे वो, and these are very powerful forces. They shape the destiny of entire society. So in the case of nation state, I was talking of Hobsbawm. उसी की बात लेकर चलते हैं. Hobsbawm is a Marxist historian. He said, first of all, nation is a modern invention, not a natural entity. It's not a natural entity and therefore also not eternal entity. ये nation state as a concept has emerged in last 200-300 years only. इसके पहले कभी थे ही नहीं, हो सकता है बाद में ना हो. It's a modern idea. Historical process है. Nation always try to claim historical legitimacy by seeing कि हम अनादि अनंत है. वैदिक एरा से इंडिया चला आ रहा है, हो सकता है. Same land, same people, same religion, same culture. But what you think of India today is not what other people in this land thought of India 500 years before us. उनकी सोच पूरी अलग थी. आज के दिन में नेशन जिसको मानते हैं वो नेशन स्टेट आज का ही प्रोडक्ट है, आज आज बना है, बदल भी सकता है. That is one point. Then the second point he says, it is formed. Now this is a typical Marxist angle formed by elites. Therefore, it is oppressive. Who creates nation state? Petro की बात कौन करता है? Middle class. They want a strong state. They want rule of law. They want protectionism, and they want all those changes which they think are important for their own progress, like protection of property, etc. Middle class nationalism create करता है, अपने पीछे सबको घसीटता है lower class को. That was the Marxist belief. That is the Marxist belief. Nation state is a creation of middle class. With the rise of bourgeois, rose the nation state. दोनों का उगम साथ साथ हुआ. दुनिया के हिस्ट्री में, यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री में खास करके, middle class started to rise in the 17th, 18th century. Therefore, there was rise of nation state in 17th, 18th century by destroying old feudal structure. उनके स्वार्थ के लिए राष्ट्र संकल्पना बनती है. Marxist idea. I am not saying yes or no. I am giving you historical perspective. There was other historian. उनका डिबेट बड़ा फेमस था. His name was Seton Watson. Although we will not get much of the scope to go into this debate, by the way, थोड़ा सा मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ. It is a very important debate in political science, in sociology, in history optional. We don't have much scope, but थोड़ा awareness helps you. जब आप तुक्का मार के आंसर भी लिखोगे ना, जब आर्गुमेंट जनरेट करोगे, या फिर you want to sometimes quote some historian randomly, तो किसको कहाँ कोट करिए तो पता चले आपको. थोड़ा सा पता होना चाहिए. He says it's not a modern invention or modern product. It has deep cultural, historical roots. Deep cultural and historical roots और basis. सदियों से चली आ रही परंपरा. बस आत्मा वही है, शरीर बदलता है, या शरीर वही है, कपड़े बदलते हैं. इंडियन तो इंडियन से, आज के कपड़े बस अलग हैं, कल के कपड़े कुछ और होंगे, हम तो इंडियन ही. That is what. So nation state has deep historical cultural roots. That is one argument. It is not a modern invention. It is not a social construct. You and me do not come together to decide कि हम nation के है कि नहीं है. तो है वो है कि नहीं है वो नहीं. And the second thing is that it is a necessary and important plus important political entity. Necessary and important political entity. It is the basis of democracy and human rights. If you don't have nation state, you will not have democracy. You will have no human rights, because there is no global government which can take care of this. तो वो ये कहना चाहता है Nation state is a modern and not modern but progressive thing. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. राष्ट्रवादी बनो तो अच्छा रहेगा. मार्क्स कहते राष्ट्रवादी बनोगे तो नलायक हो आप. गद्दार मतलब कौन? राष्ट्रवादी. ये कहेंगे गद्दार मतलब कौन? राष्ट्रवादी नहीं है वो गद्दार. बेसिक आइडिया. मार्क्स ने नहीं कहा है. He said simply that workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. मतलब दुनिया भर का गरीब आदमी गरीब ही है. उनको देश देश में बांट के रखा किसने है? मिडिल क्लास ने. इंडिया एज अ कॉन्सेप्ट इज अ फॉल्स कॉन्शियसनेस. बिकॉज इंडिया का गरीब और चाइना का गरीब गरीब है. उनकी प्रॉब्लम सेम है, सोल्यूशन सेम है. तो अपने आप को इंडियन चाइनीज क्यों माने? उनका अपना अपना दुश्मन अपने देश के अंदर बैठे. इंडियन गरीब का दुश्मन चाइनीज गरीब नहीं है. इंडियन गरीब का दुश्मन इंडियन अमीर है. पहले उसको मारो. That is the Marxist. Anyway, I am just ridiculing it to some extent. But the point is this, that nationalism is emerging. Now, what kind of nationalism it is? Is it deep historical thing or is it a new thing? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? ये debate चलता है. We'll not go into debate, but this debate becomes important in 19th and 20th century. Even today, it is important debate. Come back. So, nationalism emerged, as I said, in the early modern era, with the beginning, for example, of the absolutist monarchies. Factors such as rise of centralized nation states, spread of literacy, development of vernacular languages contributed to the growth of national identity. Intellectual movements like Enlightenment, Romanticism fueled the nationalist sentiments, emphasizing cultural uniqueness and shared heritage. अब इसके exactly बरख्त, exactly counter to this argument, shared cultural heritage की जब बात करते हैं, is it true or not? There is another historian who also passed away 5-7 साल पहले. His name was Benedict Anderson. He is also a kind of a believer in the idea that nation states are not historical. They are new and they are product, as he says, of imagined community. What is imagined community? You imagine that you are all part of the same community. In your entire life, you will not get to meet more than fraction of the people you consider Indians. कितने तमिलन को आपको दोस्त बनाओगे? कितने मुजरम लोग को मिलेंगे? नहीं मिलेंगे. तो आपके लिए टेक्निकली मिजोरम हो या चाइनीज हो, दोनों इक्वली दूर है. तो एक को आप अपना मान रहे हो, दूसरे को अपना नहीं मान रहे हो. क्यों? बिकॉज आप बचपन से वो पढ़ते आए हो. So it's a rise of print culture that leads to shared idea exchange, that leads to imagined community creation. So Anderson also says that nation states are modern things, not historical things. मैंने आपको ऐसे यहाँ point mention किया है, जरूरत नहीं थी, but I thought I should introduce some basic ideas. So although we'll go with the idea of romanticism inclines to say it's all medieval, it's all past, it's all emotion, it's all mysticism, it's all shared culture, tradition, etc. वहां से देश बनते हैं. Romantic nationalism was a very important force in the first half of 19th century. We have Germany rising, Italy rising, in France, everywhere. Nationalism became liberal and romantic. Lots of romantic poets. वो गांव-गांव जाएंगे और कथाएं जोड़ेंगे. कहेंगे देखो हमारी भाषा के असली कथाएं तो फोक टेल्स है. गांव-गांव में जाके उनको इकट्ठा करो, पब्लिश करो. क्यों? हमारा शेयर्ड हेरिटेज. We have seen that happening in India also during Swadeshi movement. But again, we'll see that in modern India. The point is that, so this is the dominant idea, but it's not about katha. It's about इसको जोड़ना, print करके फैलाना. So it's about print culture. So Anderson comes here. So we have, point here is that it could be a modern thing, it could be old thing, but it starts becoming very prominent in the early modern era. That is the point. Then in the era of French Revolution, it played a pivotal role in spreading nationalism. We discussed that already. It destroyed the internal divisions of society and created equal citizenry. It promoted the idea of popular sovereignty by Rousseau. It created citizen armies, highlighted the concept of nation defending its own territory against other nation, othering concept aa jati hai. So all these things buttressed nationalism. In the era of Napoleon, his conquest across Europe inadvertently stimulated nationalist resistance movement in occupied territories, especially in Spanish and German territories. Nationalism became a force for liberation and self-determination as seen in the Spanish War of Independence and German Wars of Liberation. So, बात क्या है? It emerged somewhere earlier, but in the 19th century, जैसे पहुंचते हो आप सब जगह ये thoughts फैलना शुरू हो रहा है, जिससे old empires are afraid. Congress of Vienna, it aimed to restore the monarchies and traditional order in Europe, but it also planted seeds of nationalism by redrawing the borders without regard for ethnic and cultural identity. उन्होंने लोगों को ऐसे ऐसे बांट दिया ना, लोग गुस्सा हो गए कि ये नहीं चलेगा. तो इनएडवर्टेंटली बिना चाहे भी आपने उसको थोड़ा सा सपोर्ट कर दिया. Actively opposed. Nationalist movements sought to challenge the established order and gain independence. So the entire idea of nationalist movement, especially a liberal kind of nationalism, would be now this. इस Metternich order को destroy करता. The success of nationalism in the midst of the 19th century is the opposition it poses and attempts to destroy Metternich system. ये the struggle between the forces of change and force of continuity क्या है? यही तो है. Force of continuity क्या है? Metternich system. Force of change क्या है? Nationalism, liberalism. अब इनमें टकराव होने वाला है. टकराव कैसे होता है? एक बार नहीं होता. बार बार 1820, 1825, 1830, 1848. Ultimately जाके it's the victory of nationalism. That टकराव we have to see for next few lectures. ठीक है? We have some comment apparently. Let me check. Is the volume fluctuating for everyone? Vaishnav, is it clear now? आवाज ठीक आ रही है? Meanwhile, continue. So nation state in the 16th, 18th century was common geographical region under the era of absolutism by them. It is still fluctuating. Let me tell somebody to find out what is the reason. The common language, common value system, common identity, cultural uniformity was important. Centralized government, monarchical, etc. ये सारी पुरानी चीजें चल रही है. नई चीजें क्या आती है? वॉल्यूम फ्लक्चुएट हो रहा है किसी को ऑनलाइन. एक बार देखना, आवाज चेक कर. कमेंट पहले पढ़ना, आखिरी दो कमेंट और फिर देख. डेमोक्रेसी, पार्लियामेंट्री पॉलिटिक्स, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म, popular sovereignty, individual freedom, middle class. Now, some of these things and some of these things get combined to create a modern nation state. ठीक है? So ये हो गई idea. But the force of change is not only liberalism and nationalism. The force of change is also at the material plane, which is increase in population. उस समय जो हो रही है with technological change and migration. And secondly, industrial revolution. So growth in the population and industrial revolution prepared the basis for the change. Population created a situation for a change in that it brought a mismatch between the demand and supply of resources, and it created unrest among the people. जब खाना कम है, लोग ज्यादा है, तो नाराजगी बढ़ेगी. हर सर आपके पास हेडफोन है? सॉल्व हो गया? ठीक, थैंक यू. And secondly, industrial revolution, it brought a change in the means of production. It prepared the way for social change. It created the proletariat class. अब इसमें एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग बात है. A Marxist historian would say, the old lecture problem is resolved. कल शाम को ओल्ड लेक्चर्स को दोबारा एडिट करके उन्होंने री अपलोड किया है. द लास्ट 2 लेक्चर्स, कल का और परसों का. They found some error in the filtering of the volume, तो उसको री एडिट करके इट इज अपलोडेड अगेन. तो कल परसों का प्रॉब्लम ठीक हुआ है. अगर आज भी होता है रिकॉर्डेड में तो बता दें. एक्चुअली वी हैव अ न्यू वीडियो एडिटर, ही इज अंडर ट्रेनिंग राइट नाउ. तो उसने सीख रहा है एडिटिंग, वो तो थोड़ी गलती करी थी और कुछ नहीं. वी आर वेरी सॉरी फॉर दैट. अगर कुछ होता है प्रॉब्लम, प्लीज लेट अस नो, विल गेट इट रिजॉल्व. नो देखो, चेंज मार्क्सिस्ट वुड से change happens because of the economic basis primarily. So fundamental force of change for a Marxist would be industrial revolution and not French revolution. समझ रहे हो? इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन अगर होती है तो मिडिल क्लास, बुर्जुआ क्लास, प्रोलेटेड क्लास का शेप वैसे होना ही है, वो आइडियाज आनी ही है, आज नहीं तो कल होना ही। दैट इज अ मार्क्सिस्ट पर्सपेक्टिव। सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल डेविड थॉमसन ने क्या बोलता है कि इवन इफ द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन हैड नॉट टेकन प्लेस, अगर वो होती भी नहीं, even then almost all the changes which occurred in as the result of the revolution might have anyway occurred eventually, होने ही थे, बस आज नहीं तो कल होते। if not today tomorrow, somewhat in delayed form, somewhat in different form, change तो होने। what the French Revolution did is to weaken, is to hasten, इसको फास्ट कर दिया the change, जिसको 25 साल में कर दे 100 साल में होते धीरे धीरे, ये बात होना तो था। That is a typical leftist perspective. The fundamental change, agent of change is revolution that is industrial and not the French Revolution is important. Important for changing the speed, not the direction. Direction किसने सेट करी थी? Industrial revolution. समझ में आया? So we have all these forces of change coming up one after another, and now trying to dismantle the whole system. So Metternich is trying to stop this. People have gathered in the Congress of Vienna to stop all these changes. They have gone for territorial rearrangement based on certain principles. We have seen कि फ्रांस के अगल बगल में strong state रहे. There is principle of legitimacy also. Then there is balance of power. There is victors को कुछ spoil मिले, spoil to the victor, rewarding victor, etc. They did everything, but that was not sufficient for them. उनको इसके आगे, it's not one time event, it's a long term process. So even if some problems occur in future, उनको कौन रोकेगा? So they create an institutional structure under the Metternich's guidance. So that thing is called as Concert of Europe. This Concert of Europe is actually created. It is an institutional structure of Metternich system. One time distribution तो हो गया लैंड का, मैप बना दिया, अब उसके आगे संस्था बनेगी उसको चलाने के लिए। वो क्या थी? Concert of Europe. It had institutional structure. It contained two main things. One is called as Congress system. Other is called as Quadruple Alliance. वो क्या था exactly? So it was a system of regular diplomatic meetings and cooperation among the major European powers. So to maintain the peace and manage conflicts, to act as an observer of Europe, and to see that there is no challenge emerging to question the territorial rearrangement of the Vienna settlement. Vienna settlement is why Congress of Vienna. It was based on the idea of collective security. तो ये 4-5 देश जो है साथ आएंगे, they will have daily, yearly or biannually they will meet. पहले नहीं होता था. Whenever there was a war or some issue, they used to come together and have some treaty. That's all. Now regularly heads of state coming and meeting each other at regular interval. अपने आप में ये बहुत बड़ा invention diplomatic world में, because they're going for collective security to manage the conflict. Diplomacy is to be used to avoid the conflict. ये भी बड़ी बात हो जाती है. It included not just the 4 members of the Quadruple Alliance, but also European powers, including France. तो उसमें क्या था? उसमें 2 चीजें थी. One thing is Congress system. Congress का मतलब क्या है? Meeting, बस. So at regular interval in different parts of Europe, all these heads of states or their representatives would come together, hold a meeting and discuss the issue. लगता है इसमें बड़ी बात क्या है? अभी भी G20 हो गया है. तो आम चीज नहीं थी उस जमाने में, पहली बार हो रहा है. Do you remember in the history of India ever in the medieval time सारे सुल्तान और बादशाह इकट्ठा बैठे के बातें कर रहे थे? देखा है आपने? होता ही नहीं था. It's a modern thing. Have you seen in Deccan you have 5 sultanates, बीजापुर, गोलकोंडा, बिदर, साथ में बैठे बातें कर रहे, इकट्ठा मीटिंग के लिए आए हर 2 साल में. देखा है कभी? नहीं होता. It was a modern. It was started by this era for the first. Some issue के वजह तो युद्ध हुआ है तो मिलने तो अलग बात है, occasionally. Here as a system you are meeting every other year. So a series of international meetings, conferences to preserve the balance of power. 4 important such meetings took place in 1818, 20, 21, and 22. And these are all called as Congress. In every meeting at that time, certain issue had come up. They came, they argued, they negotiated, and they settled the issue. Secondly, these congresses discussed issues related to balance of power and territorial rearrangements. It provided the framework for intervention. Agar, for example, in Spain, some body is rising. By this is dhokha to our arrangement. So in the Congress, they would meet and they would decide, चलो हम सबकी army इकट्ठा आएगी वहां पे हमला कर देगी. So it also justified interventionism in other states in the name of maintaining the stability of Congress of Vienna. एक बार ऑर्डर बने चेंज नहीं होगी, चेंज करने की कोई कोशिश करेगा दबा देंगे. दबाने वाला कौन है? ये तो इमोरल बात. हाउ कैन यू एंटर एनीबडी एल्सेस टेरिटरी एंड डू ऑल दिस थिंग्स? वी हैव डिसाइडेड कलेक्टिवली इन द कांग्रेस, सो मोरालिटी इज ऑन आवर साइड. सबने मिलकर डिसाइड किया तो हम इंटरवेन करेंगे. तो दैट वाज द होल आइडिया ऑफ कांग्रेस सिस्टम. देन अपार्ट फ्रॉम इंटरवेंशनिज्म यू हैव, ये तो हो गई उनकी मीटिंग कॉन्फ्रेंस वाली सिस्टम. Apart from conference, they also formed something called as quadruple alliance. It was a military alliance of the four powers: Britain, Austria, Russia, and Russia. All these four powers were against France. But in 1818 फ्रांस को भी उन्होंने उसमें शामिल कर लिया, क्योंकि फ्रांस का रूलर अब तो उनका टाइप का है. किंग इन फ्रांस, he belongs to their type, their kith and kin. So he came in their side. We have now 5 people. So quadruple alliance became quintuple alliance. 5 लोगों का एक military alliance बना, common military के साथ. It was a key element in maintaining peace and stability, working together to preserve the territorial rearrangement and enter military if possible. तो बातें वही है, but अलग-अलग से ये कॉन्फ्रेंस सिस्टम है, ये मिलिट्री अलायंस, बात वही. Now, how this system worked? The alliance was established at a time when the European powers were still recovering from Napoleonic wars, and there was a general consensus that cooperation was necessary to prevent future conflicts. So 1816, 1817, 1818, they were all on the same page. As gradually the threat of France receded, उनके अंदर के झगड़े बाहर आ गए. So, however, as time passed, the individual interests of the member states began to diverge and tensions arose between them. The Congress of Vienna and Council of Europe tried to maintain the old order in Europe. In spite of the whole conservative order of Metternich system, the forces of change could not be crushed. The legacy of French Revolution thundered throughout this time. It was due to this fact a series of revolts and revolutions were taking place between 1815 and 1848. Thus, the system could not work smoothly. So, दो चीजें हो रही है. In the working of this Metternich system, I am giving you 2 factors why the working was not so smooth. Firstly, some internal dissension. Not all powers are equal or equally oriented. For example, I'm talking about division over here. Austria and Russia were primarily multi-ethnic empire. They were very much afraid of nationalism. जहां जहां बू भी लगे, कहीं भी झलक भी लिखे, जाके दबाओ. Extremely more reactionary. So were conservative and hated the ideas of liberalism and nationalism. But Britain and France were okay. They were liberal. Internally, they have done all the reforms. So they are liberal. तो कहीं और थोड़ी बात चले तो ठीक है, थोड़ा सहन कर लेते, क्या जाना है, उनका अधिकार. So they would not like intervention as much as this other power would like intervention anywhere in Europe. And Prussia was a बीच में बैठा रहेगा, मध्यम मार्ग. तो कभी इधर कभी उधर. तो मीटिंग के लिए बैठेंगे कि अब इंटरवेंशन करना है, तो ऑस्ट्रिया एंड रशिया वुड समटाइम्स से चलो तुरंत इंटरवेंशन करते हैं, फ्रांस ब्रिटेन से हम इंटरवेंशन नहीं करना है, उनका देख ले. तो आपस में झगड़े होना शुरू. सो इंटरनल डिसेंशन, इंटरनल डिफरेंसेस, इंटरनल इंडिविजुअल इंटरेस्ट्स वेर डिफरेंट. दैट इज वन प्रॉब्लम बिकॉज ऑफ विच Metternich system was hobbling all the time. The second problem was that वो भला चाहे कितना भी माने चाहे करे, ultimately the nationalism was so strong, so powerful that it was not going to stay subterranean all the time. It will erupt बार 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 बार. तो कितनी बार इंटरवेन करोगे? कंटिन्यूस झगड़ा है उसमें. So 1820, 1840, 1830, 1840, the 3 main fates of revolution, 1820s में, 1830 में, and 1848 में. So initially, from 1815 onwards, for some years, this Congress system continued. But then they went into other direction themselves. After 1820s onwards, you see the Vienna settlement is there, but the powers are not taking decisions collectively. वो अपना अपना तरीके से, but suppress तो कर ही रहे हैं. It is ultimately in 48, you will see मेटरनिक को भगा दिया गया. जनता ने इतना माहौल किया, मेटरनिक भाग के चला गया. And then after 48, gradually you have the Italian unification and German unification. And these 2 unifications that happen in the 50s and 60s destroy the Vienna order completely. तो हमें ये कहानी देखती है. during the Greek War of Independence. We shall see the war tomorrow in thoda detail. But during the Greek War of Independence, Greek was a country which was under control of Ottomans. Ottoman was a Muslim power. Greek was a Christian country. So religious difference bhi hai. And Greeks were willing to go become independent in 1821-22. They started the War of Independence that went on for a decade. During that war, that started in 21, Russia and France supported Greek rebels. Russia wanted to have access to Mediterranean Sea. So Russia exceedingly was interested कि Ottoman को तोड़ दे. And France के अपने interest थे वहाँ पे church की वजह से. While Great Britain and Austria were initially opposed to the rebellion. So this is one instance that you see the Congress system is not working properly. उनके अंदर के differences बाहर आ गए. We'll see the war later in detail. Such differences created a rift within the alliance. Still, the system was in place until the mid-30s, when a series of revolutions and uprisings throughout Europe marked the beginning of the new era of political upheaval and change. तो ये सिस्टम धीरे धीरे कोलैप्स हो जाता है. ये सारे इंस्टेंसेस जो हम देखने हैं, बाकी अभी मैं आपको ओवरऑल नजरिया दे रहा हूँ. Now focus on the analysis of the Metternich system. Question आता है यहाँ से, was it a good, was it a bad? If you go by the old historians, it was a backward system because it's trying to suppress the new change. It is trying to go in a reactionary way, so all things are negative. So Metternich system was not given a positive light by the old traditional historians and even Marxist historians. So limitations क्या थे Congress of Vienna के? It was reactionary and a conservative force. It tried to restore the old order and to suppress progressive ideas like liberalism and nationalism. It was an integral part of conservative order, democracy, and civil rights associated with French and American revolutions were de-emphasized. So American Revolution and French के साथ जो आगे चले गए थे, 2 कदम, अब 3 कदम पीछे जा रहे हैं. Whatever progressive had happened was to be suppressed. So from that angle, it was a negative force. Secondly, it was due to this fact that it turned out to be a failure in the long run. Within 4 decades, the arrangement made by the Congress Vienna collapsed. So, समझना चाहिए आपको, समय बदलता है, समय के साथ खुद को बदलो. That is the crux. अगर आज जनरेशन इंस्टाग्राम चाहती है, तो आप इंस्टाग्राम के साथ चलो. You don't have option कि हम ट्विटर पे नहीं, हम या फिर हम फेसबुक पे जाएंगे, नहीं चलेगा. So this person did not understand that. So he tried to go back. It is not easy. देखो आप, even in the family, if the father or mother is very old style, तो लड़का या लड़की जो होगी कुछ समय के लिए सप्रेस रहेगी, बट रिबेल तो करेगी ही करेगी. घर के अंदर नहीं, घर के बाहर, आज नहीं तो कल होना ही है. सेम थिंग हियर. डोंट बी दैट ओल्ड टाइप ऑफ फादर. तो यू कैन नॉट टर्न बैक द क्लॉक. समय किस दिशा जा रहा है, समय की मांग समझो. ये नहीं समझे तो वियना ऑर्डर डिड नॉट, दे ट्राइड टू सप्रेस इट. इसकी वजह से दिक्कतें हुई, वायलेशन हुआ, वायलेंस हुआ, सप्रेशन हुआ, मारकाट हुई. एंड देयरफॉर this thing is not good. They are not progressive people. That is a traditional viewpoint of Congress of Vienna. But it also has a positive side. Achievements. The Congress of Vienna could maintain the balance of power in Europe for 4 decades. After 1815 till Crimean War, generally no important war happened, and for throughout the 19th century till World War I, no all European war happened. That is because of the conservative order was that in place because of Congress of Vienna. तो आपको कम से कम 40-50 साल और maximum 100 साल तक शांति मिली. The question was asked by UPSC a few years ago for a tired and timid generation, थके हारे भागे पीढ़ी के लिए, for tired and timid generation, the Metternich system was very much required. कि भाई 25 साल इतना अपहेवल देख लिया. इन द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन यू डिस्ट्रॉयड सो मेनी थिंग्स, यू गेव सच अ ब्लडशेड. नाउ we don't want to commit the same mistake of disorder and chaos again. So Metternich may be reactionary, but is at least bringing stability and peace. So in that sense, if you see, it is actually a positive thing. Second positive thing about it is that the concept of Europe, which was created in the Congress of Vienna, remained to be much active and watchful. It was a significant step in the transition to the new international order in which the peace was largely maintained through diplomatic dialogue. नेपोलियन ने कभी नहीं किया. So this was a new thing, diplomacy to avoid conflict management. For conflict management, diplomacy use करना, साथ में आओ बात करो, झगड़ा सुलझाओ. Now it is very common. After World War I, it became League of Nations. After World War II, it became United Nations. शुरुआत कहाँ? Beginning of people coming together diplomatically to conflict management of conflict. It's a dialogue by Henry Kissinger किताब में है, diplomacy में बड़ी अच्छी किताब है, देखो. And then we have a contrarian view also. Somebody who doesn't agree with that. Do we have to use that view? Depends on the question that is asked. Another historian called Henry Rousseau argued that Congress represented a clash between competing visions of European identity and power, with the British, Prussian, and Russian all seeking to impose their own models on the continent. So diplomacy to hai, but is it like everybody on the same page? No. British have a different idea, Prussians are different, Russians are different. So all of them are clashing. So it's not a very peaceful meeting. It's a clash of interest. It's not a committee of nations coming together for common interest. But anyway, this kind of contrarian view may be necessary, may not be necessary answer. आपके आंसर में आप रूसो को हटा भी दो, फिर भी किसिंजर की मेंशन करो, it will be. I am damn sure 99% people will not even quote Kissinger in the UPSC segment for no reason I don't understand. He is a very important thinker. So you have understood the positive and negative of Congress of Vienna. Thus, although the Congress of Vienna preserved the balance of power in Europe, it could not check the spread of revolutionary movement across the continent some 30 years later. तो 30 साल तो 40 साल शांति बरती, लेकिन सबटेरेनियन तो में फैलते रहा. So our next part is how this thing all occurred. This is an additional reading for you. I will not discuss this part as such. एक बार इस दो पन्ने को आप पढ़ लेना. Because for our next 3 to 6 lectures, this is something that will come out again and again. इसी की बात कर रहे हैं. चलो ठीक है, एक काम करते हैं. I will discuss this. Next lecture we will discuss this first. थोड़ा बधाई देते हैं and then move to the next part. We'll start with 1820s, 1830s, and 1848. I try to finish all these revolutions in 2 lectures. Yes, ये part and revolution in 2 lectures. Then one for German unification, one for Italian unification, and then comparison. Okay. That is our agenda for next 3-4 lectures. Any doubt?